Well, welcome back to Track Talk. I'm very excited to be doing something a little bit different in this video. We're going to be doing 1841, a game that we haven't done before. And in order to make sure I do it justice, we've actually recruited an expert, PhysicsSquirrel, to join the channel and give us his thoughts on this game. He was one of the players in the game, so he should have some deep insight and kind of a unique view on this game. Welcome to the channel. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I figured I would just ask you, some general thoughts about your views on 1841, and then we can comment the game, moving forward. So I guess the first question is, do you like 1841? Where does it rank in your personal preference list of 18xx games?
Yeah. So I'm fairly picky. I would say that I've got maybe five or so favorite games, and then another maybe 10 or so that I'm happy to play, but shrug, they're okay. And then everything else I feel is pretty mediocre for the most part. So I'm a little picky. And 41 is one of my top five, I would say.
Well, good. I'm glad to be doing this with you then. um, have you a preference in terms of version one versus version two, and where do you feel like 1841 Lite falls in that rank?
Okay, so I would say that 1841 version 2, not the light version, is in my top five. And the other two versions, or 41 light or 41 version 1, I haven't played either of them enough
Hmm.
to form much of an opinion. And whenever I play either of those versions, I'm basically comparing them to the version I'm most familiar with. So I would say I'm biased, but I like version 2, especially at five players.
Sure. I personally have quite enjoyed 1841 Lite. It just kind of eliminates some of the historical chrome and one of the events in the game that I don't personally enjoy. It's not my favorite part of 18xx, but I do like version two as well. I've never played version one, so I can't comment on that. And then I guess my final question is how many 1841 games have you played roughly?
It's a very good question. Um, Let me first look at how many I've played on the site because I am terrible at remembering these kinds of things. It looks like I've played nine games, at least nine games that still exist because sometimes they can get deleted or,
Right.
weird things can happen. But a lot of my in-person 41 play, we got on a big kick playing 1841 about 5 or 6 years ago. And I want to say that my total number of plays that we finished is in the range of 50 or so. It might be 100. When I give a number, I'm hoping, if I say 50, I'm hoping the correct answer is between 25 and 100
Sure.
because I really, like, I have no idea. But I'm guessing that I've finished about 50 games and that we've played the opening and then restarted another 50 or 100 times, or maybe more than that, just because the opening is so dynamic and can be fairly brittle. And my play group tends to really love analyzing the openings of games. So a lot of the days we'd play 41, we might start six games and finish one of them, just because the opening is so interesting.
Great. Well, I will definitely have some questions about the opening as soon as we get into the game, so I'm excited to hear that. Um,
Cool.
just for context, I have just recently crossed over into double digits of 1841, so
Okay.
I have very much less games than you,
Mhm.
which I think knowledgeable viewers will be expecting. But I have played enough 1841 to be a little bit more comfortable with the rule set at least. Um,
Yeah, the rules are heavy.
yeah, it's a bear to learn this one. And
Yep.
then I think my final question is about this game in particular. This group of players, I don't have any experience with these players. Are these players that you have played with in the past? Are they experienced 1841 players? Was this just a pickup game? How did this
Um,
come about?
this was a game with my friends.
Okay,
Um,
great.
yep.
So a pretty high skill set in this game then.
Um, Mixed. I would say that two players. I was the most experienced in the game, and then one other player who's relatively experienced, and three other players who have maybe played. mm, Two players who haven't played it that much, two players who played a decent amount, and then I've probably played more than everyone else. So
Perfect.
a range.
Okay. Um, Well, great. I think we'll just start jumping into the game. And just as a disclaimer to viewers, I don't usually go through games in any detail before I do a commentary, but for this particular game, PhysicsSquirrel and I both agreed that because 1841 gets quite complicated, that it would make sense to do that. So I'm familiar with how this game plays out. I know who wins and some of the shenanigans that various players get up to. But I will try to comment this as if it was in real time. So I'll try not to put spoilers into the commentary and talk about things before they happen. But I just want to be upfront about that. I'm not coming up with all these complicated strategies off the top of my head. Um, uh, all right, so we'll jump right in. Titan Rich is leading us off in the auction, and let's see if I advance here. He has put up the SFTN. SFTN is kind of one of the three most coveted companies in the auction, I would say, that the SFTG and then the IRSF,
Yep.
SFF.
Yep.
So, when you're looking at this auction, if you were to go first and have your choice, would you jump to one of those companies first, or would you put up a less valued company earlier and just try and have other players, use their liquidity on that?
I do all kinds of things. I think
Okay,
that my only bias, my only clear bias I can think of in the initial auction is that I don't like the Bayard, which is the concession number one that pays 20 at the end of every stock round.
sure.
I don't know why I don't like it. Maybe just because my group tends to like it more than me, and so I don't expect to get a deal, and therefore I rarely put it up.
Yeah,
Other than that, I've started the auction with either of the Tuscan miners, with the URSIF, the IRSFF. I never know what to call these companies. The URSIF or the SFTG, SFTN. I've I probably wouldn't start on the Cuneo, but I think I've been known to do it.
I think I've
Um,
seen some games where you have. So, um,
Yeah, it's better to run the Cuneo when you already have the SFTG, and even then, you might rather just run the SFTG for the sake of simplicity. So, I like running all. My play style. I tend to be very greedy in the auctions. I like to keep a hold of my cash. I like to get whatever deal I can, and then try to maximize the starting position I end up in. That's just kind of how I play in almost every 18xx. And that tends to be true here as well.
yeah, it's a very flexible approach. Instead of getting married to a specific company, you just kind of
Yeah.
see what you can get for a good deal. That makes sense.
Yep.
All right. Well, we will see the SFTN go here, and we'll see how much the other players want to value this company and whether or not they're going to try and take it away from Titan Rich. Hush goes up to 45, and we see the other players going up in increments of 5. You immediately have passed, and it looks like
Yeah. It
um,
looks like there was enough action on it that I just decided to let them
yeah,
figure it out.
and it goes for 65 to Daniel.
Mhm.
And I think 65 is a reasonable price. It doesn't seem too expensive. It's definitely not cheap. Do you have a value in mind for the SFTN when you're playing with your group?
I think 65 is fair,
Yeah, it
honestly.
that seems to be the
Yeah.
consensus in a lot of games. All right, so Hushed is now starting an auction, and he will go for um,
The
the
Bayard.
the $20 private. So you were talking about this before. In the games that I've played in the games that I've kind of analyzed, it seems like this pays out twice, maybe 3 times. Is that your experience as
Right.
well? Yeah.
Yep.
So it's really not that exciting of a private, but
Yeah.
because your starting order in the first stock round is going to be determined by the amount of cash you have, sometimes I think players get a little bit fancy with this and try and
Mhm.
just go a little bit earlier in priority with it. Um,
Yeah. I
so
feel that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please.
I feel that the amount of cash that you have in the first and second stock rounds can greatly limit your options. Often you get into the green phase by the beginning of SR2, which means you're going to have a double set of ORs, and a lot of the game is going to happen in those two ORs, which means that if you have a little bit less cash in during stock round two than you could have had, I feel like that can be a big impact. And therefore, I'm not willing to pay that much more than 20 on it. 25 to 35 is my range.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not at all unusual for green to break in OR1 because there's
Right.
only eight. There's only 8 2 trains, and you got five, six companies floating,
Yep.
oftentimes. So it's very common to break into green in the first
Yep.
operating round.
Yep.
Um,
And as we'll see, these companies are not created equal, and some of them need green to come out.
yeah,
And so it's incumbent on those players to make it happen.
absolutely. So this is one of my questions here. I actually this is not a question, but I will point out here that Daniel is bidding 31, and the reason he's doing this is because he wants to prevent people from getting a magic number of 576, basically, which is the 144 times 4. So this one I get, but there is a bid later on that I'm going to have to ask for your help with. Um, but I understand why he's kind of capping himself at 31 here.
Okay. Yeah, I
Um,
know whose bid you're talking about. We'll get there.
so I think everyone else is, happy to let him have it for this. And as mentioned, he ends up with $576, which is one of those quote unquote magic numbers. I do think that
Yep.
the magic number thing that I'm talking about is much less important in 1841 than it is in something like 1830 or a more traditional game. And we could talk about that a little bit once we get to the stock round. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, we'll just hold it for there.
Okay.
So now we see Daniel bidding on the IRSFF. So this is kind of a very interesting company. It has a lot going for it. Has potential for very high runs in the yellow phase and particularly in green once Milan upgrades. But it has a danger inherent in that you may end up with a lot more train liability than you are kind of anticipating if you're not careful. And we can talk about that more when the succession happens. But I think in older strategy and older playthroughs, people tended to value the IRSFF a lot more than it seems like people on 18xx.games do. Um,
Yep.
so, when you read strategy guides from the early 2000s, that kind of thing, the IRSSF is kind of the big daddy. Everybody wants this and they're willing to bid like $100 for it.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was told when I learned the game as well.
yeah, and it seems like the SFTG has really kind of supplanted this as the
Hmm.
desired company. So we'll see how players want to bid this up. You're first to
Yeah.
go, and you go up right up to 55. It's
Yep.
approaching a fair value. Probably another couple bucks is worthwhile still. And third monkey, he goes up to 68. And I think this is one of the bids where I really didn't understand the math.
Oh, yeah. I actually don't recall analyzing this number myself. I'm not sure if there was a reason for it. It leaves him with 604, which, if there was a 67 number, 604 would be interesting because it's at least 603. But I don't know where the 604 comes from, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest.
So yeah, I think this is one of the questions why I wanted to know if these were experienced players or not because I wasn't sure if I was missing something or if this was just kind of like an arbitrary bid. Um,
Yeah.
I imagine that if we asked Third Monkey, there would be a rationale behind this, and I just
Yeah,
don't
there might
know.
be.
I just don't know what it is. But regardless, he goes up to 68, and now we're just going up in $5 increments from there, so we end up with
Yep.
some weird numbers. But um, looks like Third Monkey's willing to overbid him, and it ends up going for $83.
Yep.
So
Quite a bit more than 55.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure you were happy to bow out of that. Um,
Yeah.
so now I believe you are starting a company and or starting an auction, and you're starting the SFTC. So the SFTC is another company with some history to it. If you read the strategy guides and kind of delve into the history of 1841, the SFTC was a death sentence in version one
Yep.
because I believe it was a minor, and then they also kind of reworked the way the map is a little bit. Um,
Yep. It doesn't start with a yellow tile on its home, so it takes one more track to. Oh, no, that's not true. It does have yellow, but it can't access Marseille.
okay. Yeah, so like I said, I haven't played 1841 version one, but
Yeah.
I do understand that this company is, in theory, a little bit better in version two than it has been in the past, but it's still generally considered the weakest
Mhm.
historical company. So you bid it
I
for
think
20.
Tuscany is weaker, honestly.
Okay.
Uh, but, well, or at least if you control Tuscany and that's your strategy for that to be your main company, I think that's weaker than Cuneo. But Cuneo has a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Tuscany. They haven't come up yet, but
Yeah.
it has some upsides as well. The SFTC just seems very dependent on Torino and the companies there laying some track for it, or else it's gonna just kind of languish in
Yep. Its
yellow.
biggest problem is it gets stuck in the corner.
Yeah,
If it doesn't get the Alessandria token, um, it's often going to be running a three train
yeah,
for the entire game, no
and
matter
it
how healthy your financial position is.
and it's competing against other companies that oftentimes will have more track points than it will because it only has one place to leave a token in the early game.
Yep.
So it definitely has some liabilities. So after we've kind of denigrated this company for the past 5 minutes, why did you decide to start the auction here, or what is your rationale for choosing this one?
Um, I think there was a specific strategy I was trying to play, and I don't remember exactly what it was.
Okay, so
Um,
you had some shenanigans in mind.
yeah, there was something I wanted to try, but I was only willing to try it if I got the SFTC for 20.
Okay,
So I put it up for 20.
all right. Third monkey, he's passing. Titan Rich overbids you, and I believe he takes it. He does. So
Yep, he gets it for 25.
yeah, which is only $5 more than 20. But like you said, in the next upcoming stock rounds, you may want a little bit more cash that are not available for. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's 30, no reason to spend 10 more dollars. I'm happy to win any of the remaining concessions or none of them.
yeah,
So I don't need to pay more than I was willing to.
yep. So this brings us the third monkey, the last player to have his choice of companies before we start going around again. And he
Yep.
has all the Tuscan companies and the SFTG, which is kind of the gem of the auction. And just so everybody's aware, the Tuscan companies are the companies in the southeast of the map. And this is the region of the map that's eliminated in 1841 Light. These three companies will all kind of merge together later in the game. There's two minors, the SFMA, which starts in Florence, the SFLP, which is in Lucca, and then the sole major company in Tuscany, the SSFL in Pisa. So there's a lot of shenanigans that can happen with this and the other event in the game, and we can talk about that as it becomes relevant. Third monkey, he is starting the SFTG, and this is, I think, the bid that I had some questions
Yeah,
about.
this is the one I figured, and I know exactly why he made this bid.
Okay, please enlighten me because I
Yeah,
have spent
so
longer than I care to admit thinking about it.
yeah, well, it's subtle because it's actually $4 lower than the number that you would care about. Um, so the idea here, and I learned this bid from the person who taught me a lot of what I know about 1841, a friend that I met at the Chattanooga Rail Gaming Convention, who kind of cracked this game wide open for me after our play group had been missing out on some key strategies. The idea behind this bid is that you want to run the SFTG and you want it to start a company at 680 and you want it to have enough money to buy two twos, you want it to have enough money to buy a three, and you want it to be able to buy extra tokens when it opens. Because if you do all of those things, you never have to merge the SFTG. If you have to merge away your company, if you played 41, you lose half your shares. Sometimes you can really jump your share value up,
Yeah,
but the SFTG is healthy enough that it shouldn't have to merge. And so what this bid lets you do is it lets you buy 3 shares at 144 and also have enough money to buy 4 tokens and two trains. And then in stock round 2, you will have $133, which is more than 129.
sure.
And that's how much your share costs in SR2. So imagine if someone overbids him, they have to pay 112, they'll have $128 in
I see.
SR2 and the share cost 129. So 111 is the maximum bid you can make and still buy 3 shares at 144 and 1 share at 129. So basically you can afford to, Daniel's got 576. You can afford to pay an extra $15 as long as you are willing to buy one of those shares in SR2.
I see. So you have to look ahead, not into the SR, but the following SR to make sense of this. Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you for enlightening me because that was that was bothering me. I couldn't explain that to you.
Now you know.
Yeah. All right. So Titan Rich is passing. This is a high bid, or a higher bid, I should say. So we'll see if anybody wants to overbid him, and he gets it for 107. So his strategy is kind of off to the races. He's got what he intended at this point. Now we're down to the Tuscan companies. The two minor companies have the benefit, so to speak, of share density. So it seems like most of these companies go for the minimum value, maybe 25 if someone
Yep.
feels like overbidding it. Um, but I think that if you were able to end up with all three of these Tuscan concessions, you'd probably be pretty happy if you got them for cheap. But the risk is that someone will overbid you on even just one of them, and that can really, really mess up the Tuscan merger and the ultimate fate of the SFLI. So in my mind, this is just the reason why these are quote unquote bad or not as good as the other ones is not because of the companies individually necessarily. It's because of the risk of the merger. Does that seem reasonable?
The fact that you don't have control over all of the companies, someone else can start one of the companies and use it to their own ends,
Yeah,
and then you don't get the benefit of that company's capital when the merger happens.
yeah.
So you have that. They can also sabotage your track lays.
Hmm.
There are all kinds of bad things that can happen.
Yeah,
Add that to the fact that you are forced to merge and cut your shares in half. Add that to the fact that if one of the Tuscan companies operates and then phase four happens, the other Tuscan companies never get a turn because the SFLI will only run if none of the Tuscan companies have
right,
run. So
right.
it has a lot of problems. And I would say that if you are running Tuscany and nothing goes wrong, then you are still a bit behind the players in the good positions. And that's not a good place to be because everything is just waiting to go wrong.
Yeah, and then the other issue, everything you said, I agree with, is that you now have three presidencies, and you're going to struggle to float these for reasonable prices. So you're going to be operating late, which means you probably will miss out on twos, and then all of a sudden, how do you buy your three train with a undercapitalized company? So that's another danger, I think, for trying to run all three of these presidencies, which is probably the strongest way to um, the safest way because you can eliminate some of those other dangers of tragic track and having your company be looted by the other players. So I agree.
Yeah.
It's a difficult proposition. Um, we will see Titan Rich put one of these up. Yeah. Oh, actually, he passes. I forgot that. It looks like
Yeah, he's got Kuno. He doesn't want to run Tuscany and Kuno.
yeah,
That's a mess.
people are playing game of chicken with the Tuscans a little bit, and it comes to you. You put up the SFMA. So you had three options there: the major, and then either of the two minors, and you pick the minor that's in Florence. What is your rationale there? Do you just want that revenue center, the higher
It's got a
value
better
city?
token. Yeah.
Yeah.
I figure, let me look around at the positions and see what I was thinking. Um, Everyone else is kind of already committed to a strategy, so I don't particularly expect anyone to jump in.
For competition.
Yeah, and if someone does jump in and take the SFMA for 25, I'm happy to let it rot.
Yeah.
Like they can have $25 on the SFMA, and I just won't buy the other ones. And then they've wasted $25 because they're probably not going to be willing to start it if it's the only Tuscan company. It's just a liability. So
Fair
um,
enough. Have you
that
ever
was my thought.
have you ever played where the SFMA gets tokened out or not tokened out, tracked, blocked at this double dip in yellow?
Um, I mean, I'm sure that we've seen it happen probably in one of the games that we started over. My philosophy is generally to cooperate on track in Tuscany.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
and
certainly the owner of the SFLI or the prospective owner is going to want to cooperate.
mhm,
But if you
yeah,
were, for instance, one of the other players not aiming to be the SFLI president,
yeah.
and I saw you floating the SFMA, I would be considering that. Um,
So the way that I think about it is the person who's running Tuscany, usually they are not in the best position at the table. So if I own shares of a company that will eventually merge with the SFLI, I want all of those companies to be as desirable as possible. That way my shares are likely to merge to a higher value so that when I sell them, I'll get more money. If
mhm.
I am not invested in the SFLI, then I might want to just trash its stock value whenever I can in the stock rounds so that other people get less money for their shares. But if I am invested, then I want it to do well because I can help prop up that player and I probably can still beat them because Tuscany is a weak position. Um,
Sure.
yeah.
So just kind of picking your battles, focusing on who your closest competition is.
Yeah, I tend to play very friendly unless it helps me not to.
Sure.
I care about myself, and if I have to help other people to help myself, I'll do that.
Fair enough. See, that's one of my shortcomings is I just play nasty and it just
Oh, so,
I just
yeah.
cut off my nose to spite my face.
Well,
Um,
these games give you so many opportunities to be really nasty,
yeah.
and so it's easy to be tempted into nasty moves that are not actually your best move.
Yep. 100%. All right, so you're on the SFMA. We'll see if anybody overbids you. Looks like they're happy to give it to you, and we'll see if either of these other two companies float. Third Monkey Passing, and you float another one, the SSFL, so the major company in
Hmm.
Pisa, I believe. Is that? Am I getting these names right? Yes. So over by the
No, I
coast,
didn't win it. I didn't. I got outbid.
and Hush takes it from you.
Yeah.
All right.
I was expecting to win both of these. I was very surprised when he interceded
So,
words.
just looking at it, we know that Daniel doesn't want to bid anymore because he's got his magic number. We know that Third Monkey doesn't want to bid anymore. At least I have now learned that from your strategy. So that would leave, Hushed, Titan Rich, and you to put in auction or put in bids. And I imagine Hushed is looking at this and saying, well, I don't want him to, have total control of the South there. I want to throw a wrench in his strategy, and that's why he was like, "Well, it's worth that $5 extra." He may also have just been hoping that you would overbid him, just to cost you $10.
He should know better. He knows me.
Okay,
I what I assumed, and I ended up being completely wrong, but what I assumed he was going to do in this position was that he bid on the SSFL for the purpose of not starting it. And the reason he might do that is that if fewer companies start, fewer twos get bought, the game slows down, and the IRSFF is very happy if the game slows down.
sure,
And that's his company. So he's going to run the IRSFF. The SSFL is just a spoiler bid. It's going to be terrible for someone to buy that for the face value of 50 in stock round 2 or 3.
hmm,
And so, especially in stock round 2. So he just wants to slow the game down. Or so I thought. That would be the reason I would bid 25 in that position
sure.
if I decided to.
We'll see how.
But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, our crystal balls are not always functioning well. And
No.
I think everyone just passes now. Nobody starts the SFLP, so we're into the stock round. This leaves Hushed with priority, and he is the RSFF player, so we'll see what he wants to do.
And
He,
immediately with his first action, he destroys my theory of what he's trying to do. And at this point, I'm baffled. I have no idea what his plan is. But Hushed really likes to experiment, and he will commit to the bit. He will try something, and he will just see what he can do with it. So I respect that, and I've played more 41 than he has, so I might look at a line and say, well, that's probably not going to work out. But he looks at it and says, I can learn something because I haven't done this before.
sure.
So I respect that a lot.
Now, my comment about this is, um, if you're going to start a company, why not start the IRSFF at the higher par first, and then
Hmm.
reserve the SSFL later? Because the IRSFF wants at least two trains, but now you have potentially four other players starting companies before you, so you're putting yourself in a position where maybe neither of your companies ends up with a two train. That's probably an extreme scenario. He's probably going to end up with at least one, but that's my fear. There's no urgency to floating the SSFL, but
Hmm.
there may well be some urgency to floating the RSFF. So that was my thought on this action.
Yeah.
Regardless, SFL has floated, and we're on to Third Monkey, who is the SFTG, I believe. Let's see. I,
Yep.
I
And
guess,
he's just on plan A, buy 3 shares at 144. He's
yep,
got enough money to buy a share in SR2.
yep. So he's happy with the way things are working out. Daniel's up now, and oh, sorry, the SFTG is still buying tokens. I keep getting ahead of myself. Daniel is passing, which is, again, something that I struggled a little bit with. Operating order seems quite important. And by passing, you're potentially falling back, in the train rush. Um, he wants these two trains, I assume. The only way I could explain this potentially is that he was hoping to operate after the SFTC and then take advantage of track lays from the SFTC player, hoping that they would head up towards Torino. Is that a reasonable thought? Or do you have an explanation for why he's passing?
I thought this pass was curious as well. Now, that said, I think that the SFTN cares more about its relative order with the SFTG than it does with the SFTC. It also cares more about whether it's the first company at 144 than whether it's the second versus the third, because the first company at 144 is going to get the first choice of where to start a shell company in the future.
Sure.
So I I don't think it was a grave error, but I am a little baffled by it because no, okay, so he can see that the IRSFF player, they spent what, $80 or something on that concession?
Hmm.
And he's thinking there is no way passes without starting the IRSFF. That as baffling as his first move was, there's
Yeah.
no way that he's going to give up that concession he paid $80 for. So Daniel is saying, I don't know what the hell's going on. So I'm going to see what Hushed does
Okay. So he
before I
he
make a choice.
he wants to operate after the IRSFF, or he just wants to see what that player does.
Well, Hushed actually does not have the money to par at 144. You need at least $288.
That's
So I
true.
don't think he's trying to run after it,
Yeah, that's
unless he's
fair.
actually considering starting at 100. It might be that depending on what the IRSFF or the SFTC or even my SFMA do, that he might be able to start after all of them and hope to get a three train in the first turn, which could be exciting because threes are better than twos if you get them in the first round.
Sure. All right. Well, regardless, we'll see what he gets up to. He's passed for now. Titan Rich with the
Yep,
SFTC. He is floating at 144, which again, I think
yep.
as the SFTN player, you're kind of happy with this. You're operating after the SFTG and the SFTC. There's a lot of track that you could potentially take advantage of, um, from these two players, potentially.
Yeah, I would agree.
PhysicsSquirrel, uh, starting the SFMA. And there's a choice
Yep,
here. You can pick the north or south starting location in Florence.
yep.
Oftentimes, the SFMA is getting into green pretty early, by the time it's running trains. So maybe not as consequential as a decision as I sometimes, think to myself. But I do always worry about that double dit just because I'm such
Mm,
a spiteful player. I worry that other players are going to be
right.
spiteful to me. Um,
Yeah.
but I think you do take Florence North. You do. Okay.
Yep.
And your par is for
And
68.
yeah. So I I'm not playing with random people that I have never played with before. I'm
Sure.
playing with four people that I've played with in person on a number of occasions. So I have some idea of what kind of metagame to expect. So I'm not expecting malicious track lays on the part of someone who needs my cooperation
Right.
for the SSFL to have its best life. So um, that said, in our local metagame, the SFMA almost always takes the northernmost token because then the SSFL and the SFMA can help each other get the good route.
Sure. And
So we'll see if that happens.
dits are free. So, yeah, pick up as many as you can.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right. So you part the SFMA at 68, almost certainly going to be operating last, and potentially unable to afford a three train, depending on how capitalized this company gets. So we have to see how the other
yeah.
players play this. This
Mhm.
brings us back to Hushed, and he is now floating the RSFF for just 100. As you kind of alluded to, he doesn't have the cash to float higher than that,
Yep,
which is kind of bad news for the IRSFF. This is a company that really wants multiple trains, and
yep.
he needs to buy
And now
tokens.
it can't get
So
them.
yeah,
Yep.
that's a risky move. He buys two tokens, and Third Monkey
Actually,
is
it's
just
not true that he can't get two trains. The SSFL could buy an IRSFF share, and then
that's
it could
fair.
buy two trains.
There
So it's
are
possible.
options. Yes.
Yep.
Third Monkey's passing. He has the $133 that you alluded to for a share in stock round two. And I think this
Mhm.
is as good a time as any to just point out that there is no distinction in price between the IPO and the market. Um, in 1841, which is actually a huge
Yes.
deal. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the magic numbers in the auction. The magic numbers kind of don't exist, or if they do, there's just a lot of them because you can buy 4 shares in a company in SR1 or in SR2 at no penalty, really, other than priority potentially. Um, so it's interesting because 576 is the number that you would think about, using, but you can actually get away with 546 because you can get a $15 discount on 2 shares in stock round two if you want to play it that way, which I think is
Yep.
a unique aspect to 1841.
Now, I usually don't recommend buying only 2 shares at 144. I like buying at least the third share, and the reason is 288 minus 100 for the two obligatory tokens is 188,
Yeah,
and that's less than 200.
yeah,
And so you can't buy two trains. The one thing you can do is if you're the SFTC, you can lay one of the $50 tiles and buy a single two train. So maybe it can sometimes afford to buy only two of the shares in the first round. But usually, um, wanting capital in the very first OR for trains and for the tokens that you buy when you float means you have to buy a certain number of shares immediately to have that money.
sure. Unless, like you said, you find yourself in a position where you have two companies and you can buy a share, in the
True.
OR to shuffle
Yeah.
some cash around. But yeah, 100% correct. All right. So Daniel is up again, and he is floating the SFTN. So the two players that kind of um, stalled in the first round of this stock round have now declared their strategies. And as you kind of suggested, he floats low. He floats at 100. And I have to assume this is because he wants to operate um, behind the. He just wants to operate late. Is he hoping to get a 3 train, do you
Yeah.
think?
I don't think it's realistic for him to
Yeah.
expect a three
The
train
IRSFS
because
just doesn't have
Drew
the money.
Hushed does not have the money
Yeah.
to buy more than three trains, and the SFMA is running after the SFTN. So I think the odds that he gets a three train are zero.
Yeah.
So I'm actually not sure why he parted 100.
Because he could have parted at
Um,
144 and still operated after the SFTG and SFTC. So yeah, I don't know.
yes. So I think I would have parted at 144 here. I'm guessing that he just wanted to have more shares. Um,
Okay. Well, who,
yeah,
who doesn't want more shares? Can't fault him for
right.
that.
Yeah.
Buys his tokens, and Titan Rich is up. He passes. You buy another share. I mean, you're kind of obligated to buy shares. I mean, you're limited at 3 shares, but you really need to get some capital into this company. Um,
Yep.
Hushed doesn't have cash, so he's passing. I noticed that in your play group, players tend to sit on cash a lot, at least in this first stock round, and we'll, I guess, talk about that in stock round two. Um,
Yeah.
but it is not the only way of playing 1841. Maybe it's the correct way of playing. I'll defer to you on
It's
that.
very hard to say what's correct.
Yeah,
1841 is so complicated and so many things are situation dependent and metagame dependent. But there are, the one obvious advantage of saving your money is that shares are cheaper in SR2, right?
yep.
So,
And you
that's
also can do a lot of manipulation of turn order and share
yep.
trashing to prevent them from just turning around and floating another company very easily. So there's a lot to be said for this, but you are costing
Yeah.
yourself some capital early in the game.
You're costing yourself priority and you're costing yourself some capital in your company in OR1.
Yeah,
And what you gain is you get a slight discount on some shares, and you gain some flexibility to either respond to what other people are doing or to be the guy making things happen
yep.
in SR2.
And to be clear, the you're getting shares at a discount, but that comes at the cost to your company, of course. So it's a little bit of a push pull there.
Hey, you
Um,
can buy other people's shares at a discount too.
that's true. Just like in 46, attack them and deplete their IPO. Uh,
Right. Yeah. Incremental cap games,
yep,
46 and this game do have that in common.
yep. Third monkey passing. Daniel, he buys one of your SFMAs. That's a pretty big boon to you in terms of operating capital, but you also are, like we said, depleting your treasury. These shares. This is why I tend to be a little bit more bullish on the Tuscan companies than it seems like you are is just the share density. So, I mean, all these are 20% shares. So if you're running for 90 and the IRSFF is running for 110 or, 130, that $90 payout is actually better because it, translates to 180.
Yep.
So that's the benefit. I understand why people are buying these shares. But
Yeah,
we'll see if anybody
that's the
wants,
reason.
yeah, anybody wants to float you.
And that benefit extends up until phase four. And so and this I think is a big reason why people value the IRSFF a lot higher. If you look at old guides, which are you've said that that's the case. I haven't read a lot up on this game. I'm mostly self-taught
Yeah, if you
by
if you
by
delve into
having the
the
opportunity or the privilege to play with people who are better than I am.
if you delve into the dark mists of the groups.io, there's quite a bit of conversation in the early 2000s about 1841 and some thoughts from early plays.
Oh, another thing is that version one's a very different game. The IRSFF, I think, is a much stronger company in version one. Now, I maybe that's not true because it was considered a buff for it to split into two majors instead of two minors. So I don't know what I'm talking about. I've only played version one once or twice. But the game's so different, and I think that some of the opinions about which companies are good are holdovers from version one, and some of them have to do with a metagame that either doesn't value trying to get the four out as early as possible, or just a less advanced metagame. It's hard to say, whether something's more advanced or just a difference of play style.
Yeah, absolutely. Titan Rich, he is passing. You are passing as well. So I think we just enter the operating round. No, Daniel does float up the SFMA. He's just
Yep, he buys both of them while
yep.
they're still available.
So split
Because
presidency,
companies could always snap up those shares during the OR.
sure. Split presidency, and he's going to be reaping almost as much a reward from this company as you are at this point.
Yep, I'm going to be paying out.
So we pass into the operating round. Titan Rich has priority, and one thing I'll just point out to viewers that aren't familiar with 41 is that even though some of these presidencies look like they're very vulnerable, looking at the two share investments on the IRSFF and the SFTN, there's a unique quirk for 41 where these presidencies can't be stolen until I believe it's phase four when the concessions go away. So even if someone were to pressure, for instance, PhysicsSquirrel has $400, he could steal the IRSFF presidency in terms of majority of shares. He's not actually going to be operating that company because the concession will remain with Hushed. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and for that company in particular, as you'll see, when phase four hits, it won't even exist. So
Correct. Correct.
a
That
bunch of
was
crazy historical stuff happens at the start of phase four, and we
yeah.
will see that.
That was a poor example. There's a lot of reasons not to buy a ton of shares into the IRSFF right now,
Yeah,
but we will
there's a lot you could talk about there,
we
but let's
will
move on.
see that in a moment. All right, so
Yeah.
SFTG is first to operate and heads down to Alessandria. There's another rule in 1841 where the number of track lays is equal to the number of tokens, at least early in the game. So he's able to double lay, and then I expect he'll buy two trains, and he does. So six left, SFTC now. He does something that's a little bit unexpected from my perspective and actually heads south towards Marseille. Marseille is a good revenue center, and he's going to be tokened out at Torino, for the entire game at this point. But Marseille is expensive to lay towards, and he's getting behind in terms of developing track towards Milan with this strategy. Were you expecting this, or were you kind of expecting him to head up north or towards Alessandria?
I there are two things that I like to do with the SFTC. One is I will lay one tile toward Torino if the SFTG indicates it's willing to lay the tile toward me in
Hmm.
exchange, and that can be mutually beneficial. The other thing I like to do is to lay toward Marseille, which does require you to be able to afford those two mountain tiles. The benefit of going to Marseille is that it is going to auto upgrade to a $100 city in phase four, whereas Torino will only be worth 60. Also, you probably are going to have a three train at that point. And at that point, Torino may have already built down to you because Cuneo is a good revenue center. So it's possible that route gets built anyway. And then you have a good three route from Marseille to Torino.
Yeah.
So
Um,
I'm not opposed to this.
okay. Yeah, I mean, Marseille is just a strictly better revenue location at every phase than Torino. And if you lay north, you always run the risk of the other players not cooperating with you or, it not breaking into green, and then SFTN can't cooperate with you even if it wants to. So this is probably a little bit of a safer play if you have the capital to pull it off. We anticipate him buying a single two train because he's only going to have one route. Um, and we're into the SSFL, so first of the Tuscan companies. And he has one track lay because he only has the one token, of course. And he has choices. He can head to the port, which is basically a free stop, or he can head towards the double dits. And if I'm this player, I'm heading towards the port because I'm assuming that you're going to be laying that double dit. But let's see. He does,
Yep.
and we'll see how many two trains he wants. He can run two of them, so I would be tempted to pick them both up.
So
And
there's an important
he
thing to
does.
note here, and that is that the SFTC, which just ran, bought a share of the IRSFF.
I
And that
missed
means the
that.
IRSFF has $200, which means the SSFL doesn't have to buy a share of it in order for it to have $200. So it
That
might be that had that not happened, he would have bought a share of the IRSFF so that it could buy two twos. But
that's
he was relieved of needing to do that.
that's fair. I missed that. One of the dangers of 18xx.games is you have this scrolling action log, and if you aren't paying close attention, you can miss things like that. So that is a very important
Yeah,
point.
you don't get a nice big animation in the middle of the screen telling you exactly what everything is that's happening. It's really just you have a game state A, just transforms the game state B instantly, and you have to look at the log to see what it was that just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out. IRSFF is up, and very common for IRSFF to lay Bergamo and then use its second track lay over in Venice. But I think we actually don't see that in this game. He does lay Bergamo
Yep.
and passes his second track lay. And I think at
Yep.
this point we may want to just briefly touch on the Ferdinand, I don't know how to pronounce that, succession.
Ferdinand.
Um, because
Franz Ferdinand.
fair enough. There is probably a good reason to not lay track for Venice, but there is some pretty strong costs to not laying track as well. So the IRSFF is going to split apart into the SFL and the SB. The SB is going to be on Venice, and the SFL is going to be on Milan. And Milan is just a better location on the map. So the SFL is balanced by basically getting the short end of the stick in the division of all of the IRSFF's assets. So it's going to get the worst train. It's going to get the fewer tokens if there's an odd number of tokens. It's going to get only 10% of the cash in the company. So when I see someone doing this, it says to me that they are trying to take the SFL. They are going to try and basically make sure that there's no money for the SB and just get all the cash out of the IRSFF and then be able to transfer that over to the SFL. Um, and then just basically let the presidency of the SB kind of evaporate into a frozen company or whatever. Whether or not that happens, we will shortly see. But what is your read of this situation? Why? I mean, would you lay track here and just hope to run hot in the early game?
Um, I think that Hushed is experimenting, and I don't know exactly what it is that he's planning to do. It's already surprising to me that he controls the Tuscan Major along with the IRSFF.
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of waiting to see what he does.
Okay.
Um,
Fair enough.
I will note something about the SSFL's track lay. You were mentioning you could go down to Livorno or you could lay the double dip. There's a big advantage of going to Livorno, and that is that laying a second token, as you mentioned earlier, gives you a second track lay next turn.
That's fair. Yep. And building up this Tuscan track is super important because the SFLI is going to be desperate for runs, basically, once everything merges. So you really want to take advantage of the track points that you get by having multiple companies operating in the South while you can. So that's a good
Yeah.
point.
And
Iris,
likewise, the reason the IRSFF doesn't lay a second track near Milan is that you must lay the tile out of the token that is granting you that track lay. So one has to be near Milan and the other would have to be near Venice, and he opts not to use the Venice trackway.
Correct. Yes, the tracklays can pass through a token, which is kind of what we had seen with the Torino, I believe. But you can't lay two tracks from a single token, is what you're pointing out.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah.
IRSFF got a little bit of a gift here, and we'll be buying two trains. Actually, he just buys one. Okay, I had forgotten that. So
Oh, interesting. Yep. And I
that's
continue to be baffled.
yeah. I mean that's rough to explain. Um, yeah, the whole strength of this company is how good its runs are out of Milan. You want a bunch of trains, but he's going to forego that for now.
It looks like he does buy an SSFL share. So he's moving some of that money backwards into the SSFL.
Okay. SFTN has a little bit less options than the SFTG does and starts heading north. I'm just going to briefly talk about the rules for the borders. There's this border separating Torino from Milan. So, at least in yellow phase, you can't lay track across it. And then, even in green, you can't lay tokens across it. So, SFTG and SFTN are kind of in a death match to see who can get a token down in Milan a lot of the time, but there's a little bit of a delayed gratification. And it makes it very hard, at least for me, to predict who's going to end up with that token because the operating order matters, but it also matters a whole lot when that four train comes out, which is not always easy to predict. Um,
Very difficult.
yeah. So SFTN's buying a single two train, and we round us out with PhysicsSquirrel and the SFMA, who's going to be laying that double dit, and you lay it getting into Pisa. And I think this also is eventually going to allow a pretty nice three run into Florence for the SSFL, potentially for the SFMA as well. But I don't know that you're going to have cash to buy a three train. We'll see. Um,
I won't. Yeah, I've been looking at the last two, and $290 is not a good amount when you would like to buy a two and a three.
yep, you're going to be $10 short. And you have
Mm-hmm.
no way to get cash in this company short of a withhold, which, as an aside, is a little bit uncommon in 1841. Not that nobody ever does it, but it's you have so many financial mechanisms to get cash into companies, you don't see a whole lot of withholding. All right, so we are into the next stock round, and Titan Rich has priority, and you are kind of the standout here in terms of cash. So I think the other players have to be a little bit afraid of what you have in store for them because you can
Yeah.
do a whole lot more than they can. Hushed is, unable to buy any shares at all, and everybody else is looking at one, maybe two shares. But you have
Yep.
the power, so to speak.
Uh, I have a chance to punish some people for having bad companies that are overpriced, and the SFTC appears to be my first victim.
It's a very 1817 outlook.
Yeah, right, it is. This game, one of the things it has in common with, I mean, honestly, this is a dynamic in a lot of 18xx games. When you can reduce someone's share price for free, and all it costs you is additional stock actions. In this particular stock round, I expect that I'm going to be taking the last action because I have a bunch of money. So extra stock actions are kind of meaningless to me. Um, Now, if your company is bad, I don't mind dropping its value. It just hurts you because it hurts your ability to raise money in that company, and it doesn't help anyone. If I were to drop a company like the SFTG's share price too much, then the shares are cheap and people get to buy those cheap shares. And I don't like it when other people get to do good things. So I'm less inclined to tank the share value of companies that are going to run well.
Yeah, you'd rather just hold on to those shares on your own
Exactly.
into the operating round. One other thing I'll point out is that he's able to do this because there's no kind of penalty IPO to market. Um, but
Right.
that's a feature of 1841. The other thing I'll point out is that it's a sell buy game. So he does have a little bit of liability, really not very much, but he has to buy two shares and hold them before he can sell them if he wants to buy two shares. Um, Hushed is passing. Third Monkey, he's passing. I think everybody is just waiting for you to sell shares so they can buy them cheaper. Um, Daniel does buy an SSFL, and Titan Rich is passing. You buy. Oh, okay. So you actually don't buy two shares. You're
Yeah, I
just gonna.
just sold one.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and then you will pick up an IRSFF. Now, you were talking about how the SFTG is too good to trash. The IRSFF is probably usually too good to trash, but because it only has one train, um, I guess it's more attractive, right?
Oh, there's one thing that's worth mentioning. We can talk about it after we get to next talk round, or we can talk about it now, and that is that we're in phase two. We have not gotten to phase three. And
Correct.
frequently you do get to phase three, and that means in this stock round, you'd be facing a double set of ORs, which means a significant portion of the game is about to happen. We're going to have only a single set of ORs, which means I have an opportunity potentially. Um, I'm not as pressured to buy shares and hold them
That's
because
true.
we're only going to play one OR. So I might be more inclined than usual to drop the share price of shares and then hope to buy them cheaper next stock round.
Sure. Yeah. You're only going to miss out on one payout. And if you drop it
Right.
enough, you even with a payout, you will still get a discount on the share. The
Right.
only other thing that we've kind of beaten this to death, but the only other thing that we becomes relevant with this strategy is that there are some of these companies that are not going to run it for enough to advance their stock price because you have to run for more than your stock price to actually move right. So I don't know how relevant it is with just one operating round, but if you drop a company's share value so much that it's able to move right with its revenue, that is another kind of factor to have in mind, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so Hushed still passing. Third Monkey, he picks up an SFTC that's been tanked. Daniel, he's not afraid. Yeah, he's just buying shares. He probably is thinking the same way you are that you're not motivated to tank the SFTG, so he's just buying shares. Um, Titan Rich has passed so far and continues to do so. You will buy another IRSFF. So this is what I was talking about. Two factors become relevant here. One, you have to hold this and open yourself up potentially to a dump. I think you're safe, and I imagine you feel that way too. But that is something to think about. And the other thing is that you actually can't steal control of this company. I mean, you could have the majority of shares, but Hushed would remain the president. I actually don't know
Right.
how this works. So if the four train comes out during an operating round, do you immediately become the president, or do you have to wait till the stock
Yes.
round? Okay, all right. So
It's tricky. So there, first of all, he's not allowed to dump the company on me. He must retain the presidency as long as he holds the concession. So even if I bought more shares, he cannot dump it on me.
fair enough.
Second, when we get to phase four, what's going to happen with this company is it's going to get split into two companies, the SB and the SFL.
Yeah,
And the first player who holds a pair of shares is going to get to choose one of those presidencies, and the next player is going to be forced to take the other presidency for their two shares.
right.
Now, the tricky thing is the concession disappears and the presidency shifts if I hold more shares than the current president before the split happens. So if I
Okay,
had three shares and Hush had two, I would become the president, then the company would split, and I would get first choice of which half I wanted to keep.
right, right. I keep keep using the IRSFF as an example where it's really
Right, right. Yep.
poor
And that's
example.
part of why I'm willing. I don't remember if I sold these shares or not, but it's part of why I'm willing to hold them if I end up doing so.
Yeah, and while we're talking about the succession, you'll see a lot of players buy three shares in the IRSFF and just stay there, in specifically to avoid ending up being both presidents. Um,
Mhm.
so uh, we'll see how that plays out. Hushed passing, Third Monkey. He bought and sold the SFTC, so he's still going to
Uh,
be looking for um, a paying share. He is just kind of riding on your coattails, so to speak, double trashing the SFTC. It's not
yep.
not enough to change operating order, at least not yet, but it is hurting
Nope.
the SFTC in its ambitions of ever starting another company.
Yeah,
You
we're
know,
just making Rich sad here.
yeah, it's you're ganging up on him. It puts a share in the market, which is bad because he can only issue five, and then it also decreases the value of each of those shares that he issues. So it's a two-pronged attack, so to speak. Um,
Yeah.
Daniel out of cash. Titan Rich. Oh, so actually Daniel is doing something. He's trashing the SFTG. I imagine you're happy to see that because you're going to be snapping up some cheap shares. Um,
Mm.
and he also buys the SFTC. So the SFTC is just getting beat up.
And he
Um,
buys it out of the market, which makes me think he's just going to sell it again.
yeah.
Uh, poor
Titan
Rich.
Rich is suffering and he's still passing. You're up now, and I think you do end up selling these shares, but let's see. I think
I don't do it yet.
I may
I
be
buy an
ahead. Yeah,
SPN.
I may be ahead of myself, but I think that we
Hmm.
do see that, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Hush, happy to just wait. Third monkey passing. Daniel out of cash. SFTC player. He buys the cheaper SFTG. You might be um, kind of upset by that because I'm sure you were hoping to buy a couple of these, but let's
Well,
see.
there's plenty to go around, and he
Yep,
buys it out of the IPO. Interestingly, he's not interested in propping up the value.
yep. You turn around and buy from the market, so it won't be falling back. And Third Monkey's the only player with share money right now. He buys an SSFL.
Yeah, he's not going to hold that, I don't think.
So if he changes the operating order, it will not change the way the merge happens because he's not going to be able to drop it behind the SFMA. I know that there's a bug in this game, and we could talk about that when it comes up. But
Okay.
we, in theory, Hushed should be managing the Tuscan merge because he has the higher
Yep,
share value.
that's right. Yeah,
Uh,
that there's a an interesting situation that's going to end up happening there, if
yeah,
I recall.
yeah. The way the SFLI, not to get ahead of ourselves, works in this game is very interesting. Um, PhysicsSquirrel, you're actually selling out of the SFTG. A little bit surprised by that. Um, so you were anticipating some pretty good runs for this company, but I guess as long as the green trains don't break, maybe it won't have good runs. Um,
I think that I was thinking along the lines of what I said earlier, where I am going to try and buy these shares next round
yeah,
because
okay,
we're only running once.
fair enough. It looks like most of the players are passing. Titan Rich, he sells the share like you anticipated. And what did he buy? He bought something there too. Sorry, Third Monkey, not Titan Rich. He bought the SFTG that you just tanked. Okay.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, he held on to his money because he wanted to defend the share price of his own SFTG, which makes sense.
Fair enough. Daniel, he buys the SSFL, so clears the market there. Titan Rich passing. You're passing. Looks like all the players pass, and we're into operating round two. Still in yellow, as you alluded to. And the SFTG, since we're in yellow, the only option is to head down south, which is probably going to make the SFTC player kind of happy. But unfortunately for him, he only has the one train.
You know what? Even with only one train, you're always happy for people to build track for you. So the SFTC is probably feeling really bad about how the stock round went, but feeling pretty good about its decision to build down to Marseille.
Fair enough. SFTG runs his two trains. He has the double track lay, so he's actually able to lay all the track for the SFTC. Runs for 140, which is enough to move to the right. And he has cash to buy that three. Does he do it? He does. So that's great news for the SFTN and the SFTC who get upgraded track given to them basically.
Yep.
SFTG could, in theory, have started issuing shares, correct? No.
Yes.
Yes, this is their second operation. So oftentimes in the second operation, we do see players sell down and start, daughter companies, but he is not doing that for now. A little bit surprising. I mean, if you're ending up with priority or first operating, if you're the first company to start a second company, you have your choice of where on the map that company is going to be, which is pretty
Mhm.
powerful. So a little bit
Yeah.
surprised that we didn't see that.
Yeah.
He has a healthy share value. I mean, he could raise a good amount of cash. I don't have the number offhand by selling out here, but he's gonna forgo that for now. SF,
Yeah. I'm guessing he's worried that he would not be able to buy a fifth share of this company because when he issues the shares, the stock price would drop all the way down to 53.
that's fair.
And then other companies would buy those shares, and then he is fourth to act in the stock round. So he probably never gets that fifth share. So I'm guessing that's why he didn't do it. It's possible he's supposed to do it anyway, but it wouldn't feel very good to let other people buy those $53 shares and not to get one yourself.
That's fair. And the other thing is, it's a little bit risky issuing and starting a company right before the stock round. So later phases, you have multiple operating rounds to kind of shuffle money around and potentially defend your presidencies. But if you issue and then start a company right into the stock round, another player may be able to make life a little bit miserable for you, like you said, by buying all your shares or potentially even stealing your daughter company that has all your company's capital in it. So
In
let's
this
see.
case, he would be starting at 340, And because the company is a new company, players would not be allowed to sell those shares because it has not operated, which means people are not going to buy them unless they can take it over. And that
With it
requires a
being
net
so
worth
expensive.
of
Yeah.
over 1,000.
Yeah.
No one even has no one's even worth like two-thirds of that to be able to do it.
That's true. There are scenarios where that happens. I don't know if we see that in the game, but I have seen someone lose their daughter company. Um,
So it can happen. Yeah.
yeah, by starting it right before the stock round. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
SFTC, he heads down to Marseille, runs his two train, which, courtesy of all the stock trashing, is enough for him to move to the right. Um,
Yeah.
and he probably picks up a three as well. He does. And his stock value is low enough, and he has a share in the market where his options in terms of starting new companies are a little bit more limited than the SFTGs are. So we may see him just pass. He does. He doesn't start a company either. Um,
Yeah.
and this is, I think, partially a consequence of all the trashing that occurred. Companies just their stock values are just that much lower, where
Yeah.
starting a new company is just hard. Um,
Yeah, no, it's worth pointing out here that well, he can't predict whether other people are going to jump in and sell his shares. So this wouldn't have been necessarily a safe play, but what he could have done is not buy the SFTG and buy his own share out of the market, and that would guarantee that he could issue an additional share and raise an extra $100, and that would have allowed him to start a company.
yeah,
But he still wouldn't have been able to buy the three. He would have to choose between the two, and that's pretty painful. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, really.
yeah. Which is all too common for the SFTC player, I think.
Yeah,
It is
sadly.
just starting a little bit behind the other players.
Yep.
IRSFF is up and upgrades Milan just because of the massive revenue increase from that. But again, probably kicking himself a little bit that he wasn't able to get a second train, um, is he could have really nice runs.
Well,
Um,
he
he doesn't have
if he
enough. He
was
doesn't
willing
have
to
the
lay
tokens.
Venice,
Yeah.
he doesn't have the track to run two routes out of Milan right now.
Well, what I oftentimes see is three tokens in the IRSFF, and then someone tokens Bergamo so
Mm,
they can
yes.
lay a bunch of track. But he didn't
If
do
he had
that.
tokened Bergamo, he would have been able to run two trains.
Yeah.
But if he bought an extra token, he wouldn't have had the money for an extra train.
And this all comes back to, I think, his low par. Um,
Yep. Well,
his
it's the money that he sank into the SSFL because he had $500 and he spent 300 of it parring the SSFL and only had 200 left to par the IRSFL.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So he
it's
put himself in this position.
butterfly effect. Your early actions have an outsized effect on how the game develops.
Hmm.
Running a single train has decent revenue, but much less than we typically see. He picks up a three train, and he doesn't take any stock actions either. SFTN has the green upgrade and now has better routes for himself. Just a single two train though. And with his payout, doesn't have money for a three train, so that makes that company pretty poor, um, unfortunately. He is the first company to issue shares and will be having his choice of token locations. So he starts the AFI, and I think he puts that in Genoa. He does. So Genoa is an interesting spot. There's only, I think, 6 places you can start companies in this part of the game, and Genoa is kind of all off on its own. Um, it doesn't have the same late game potential in terms of tokens oftentimes as these other companies or these other locations, Parma and Modena and Bologna, because they link up between Rome and Milan. But if you have a player that's motivated to lay all this expensive track down south, a run from Marseille to Rome is also pretty good. So in terms of token location, maybe a little bit less desirable, but it has the major strength of being a pretty hard suitcase to break.
Right.
Suitcasing is a pretty central feature in 1841. So it's a very secure suitcase. It's a little bit less secure in this particular game because the SFTC player has already laid a lot of the track. So I think your expectation that this company will be left alone has to be a little bit lower in this particular game than it often is.
A
Um,
little bit, but it's still three track lays and $100 for someone to give you a route, which is hefty.
yeah, yeah. But that's a lot less than 5 track lays and
Yep, that's
$200.
true. Yep.
So we'll see how this develops. But Genoa is a pretty nice place for your second company. Pretty safe place.
Yep. And I
Uh,
think the suitcase is the reason that people choose Genoa typically.
yeah,
Unless you're the SFTC, in which case you choose it because it's the one place you could actually connect to.
actually get a token. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so we're back into Tuscany. Hushed is up on the SSFL, and I imagine we'll be seeing him upgrade Pisa. He does, and then he heads over to the port. So he's doing this just because these port tiles are free for his train. When I initially was watching this game, I was expecting him to head over to Florence, but I think in retrospect, his run is actually a little bit better doing what he's done, and he's going to rely on you to lay his track into Florence for him, which I think is a pretty safe expectation. Um,
Yeah, he does run for slightly more this way, I believe.
yeah, at some point I did the math. I think it's at least $10, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's an extra dollar. Yeah.
Yeah. So he pays that out, and he buys a three train, so a bunch of trains in this company, and he's going to have really nice revenue, but he needs to be a little bit careful that the four train doesn't come out before he's able to run again, which I think he is, at some danger of having occur. That's always the double-edged sword of buying trains is that, you get better revenue, but you're accelerating their demise. That's not unique to 41.
Yeah. Well, he buys a three train to, you know, not be forced to buy a train
Sure.
uh,
Um,
and to move his share price forward when phase four hits.
yep. SFMA is up, and you head into Pisa. No tokens for you running the miner company, but you are able
Yep.
to take advantage of the free dits that he's laid for you. So that's one downside to doing what he's done is that yes, his run is $10 better, but your run is tons better. You
Yeah.
know, so there is a push and pull there.
But he's
You
got to merge with my company, so at least he's giving me the opportunity to lay useful track for him.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second. When the merge happens, your company grows up into a major company, so your 20% shares become 10% shares, which means you'll have 30% of the company, and
Right?
then he has 30% of his company. So technically, you guys are tied, but because
Yep.
his share value is higher, he should have. First of all, he's going to make the decisions in the merger, and he should also have the opportunity of exchanging shares for the presidency first. So it's very important when you're involved in any way at the Tuscan merger situation to have your finger on the pulse of who's going to end up with the presidency. So right now, Hushed should be ending up with that. Daniel, actually, I take everything I said back. Daniel has four shares. So someone that is not the president technically would end up with the presidency of the SFLI if things were to stay as they are. Um, is is my interpretation? I think that's correct. Um, he has more shares than anybody else,
Believe that that is true.
which
It's a
is
little bit more complicated than
yeah,
that.
that's not something that
Um,
I appreciated when I was going through this game. But technically, as it
yeah.
stands right now, neither of you would end up with the presidency. Um,
Well, Hushed would have the option to take the presidency because of some arcane rules that I can explain if we get to it.
okay, we will put a pin in that for now.
Okay.
SFMA is paying out. You have a $90 revenue, but because your shares are 20%, you're actually, I believe, running for the most um, out of anyone.
Yeah, 18 being the highest payout here, it feels a little odd to me because usually the IRSFF runs for 26.
Yeah, but we've talked about that. You're not in really a position to start a second company. You have no shares to issue, and we pass into the stock round. So Titan Rich has priority, but he is starting to lag in this game a little bit. The SFTC is just a hard one to come back from.
I think that he should have started the Genova company while he had the chance at 216 because that's all he could afford.
Yeah.
And I think that having that company, even though it's not at 340, having a company start that's nearby that you can merge with um, and that can raise you a lot of capital, I think it would have been worthwhile. But we agreed that he is in a rough position one way or the other.
Now, to be fair, starting at 216 is not at all a death sentence. Like that is a
Oh,
pretty
not at
pretty
all.
common way to par your second company.
Hmm.
Usually, your third company is at 340, but it's not. that common for your first company to be at 340. So he definitely is, he missed a little bit of an opportunity there, I would say. Um, you're up on in the stock round, and you're buying an SFTG. Hushed.
And I don't think I will sell that share.
Right. Now that it has three trains and we're in green, it's going to be running pretty well. Um,
Mhm.
so did this end up being cheaper than it would have been if you hadn't trashed it? I
No,
think,
I would have made a profit on it actually
yeah,
because it was at 129. Now it's at 130 and it had a payout.
yeah.
So I
Well,
did not make money by
by
selling those shares.
trashing it, yeah. I
Hmm.
think trashing it, no, it would have moved forward either ways because it ran for
Yep.
140.
Yeah. So it would have been at 144 and I would have gotten a dividend.
Yeah,
So I did that didn't exactly pan out.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not sad,
No,
but
yeah.
could have been better.
Third monkey, he is buying the SFTN. It's very cheap
Yeah, they
because it's
only cost $50.
yeah, um,
Um,
because of the issue or the fact that Daniel issued to start a new company. So
yeah, the fact that Rich passed on the $50 share, um, not sure that was a good idea, but it means I'm more likely to get a second one, so I'm quite happy. And then Hushed also passed on the share, which again I'm happy about because maybe I'll get another one.
I'm sure Daniel's happy about it too. Um, let's see if he's buying his own shares. He's selling out of the SSFL and the SFMA, so he's selling out of everything, and he does buy an SFTN. Let's see if he's
Yeah.
able to get a second one.
And looking at this, I'm actually not sure why I bought the SFTG first. I probably should have bought the $50 share instead.
Well, hindsight's 2020. It's hard to
Yeah.
like we've alluded to. This game gets complicated fast, so fair
Yeah.
enough.
I'm
Tight.
also regretting starting the SFMA because its share value, the share value of the merged company is not receiving any favors. Hushed is in an awkward position, and I feel like I got a little bit baited in starting that company.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I could have written off a $20 loss, but here we are.
So Titan Rich is doubling down on the SFTC. We've just talked about, how attractive the SFTN is for these cheap prices. There's definitely companies that are going to be running better than the SFTC. And he's taken, well, I guess it was a market share. So he's not hurting himself, but there's no guarantee that he still doesn't fall back. It would be pretty easy for someone to put another share in the market. Um, you're up and you buy the SFTN. So you're going back for the cheap shares. Hushed. He buys an SFTN. It seems like everybody has realized what a value the SFTN is now.
Yeah, we woke up.
But Daniel's happy. I mean, he got more shares than he probably was expecting.
Yep.
Um, so he buys another SFTN. Titan Rich is just sitting tight, and I think you end up with another SFTN here. So this is a split
Yeah.
presidency, um,
Yeah.
and this
And
company,
I'm pretty happy about that.
yeah, this company generally has legs. SFTG, IRSFF, and SFTN have great map position, and even if the companies don't survive in name, those tokens retain their value. So um,
Yep.
we'll see
He's
how that.
also the only player to have started a child company, which means that he's ahead of the game on printing money.
Right,
So
because it takes. Oh,
yep,
sorry. It takes.
I'm pretty happy to be invested.
Yeah, it takes basically three operating rounds after it's started for it to fully vest in a sense. There are ways to access the cash earlier through emergency buying or other techniques, but to fully issue your shares and then buy a train with that new money takes a while. So you need to plan. Your ply analysis has to be pretty on point to see how things are going to work out. But starting that clock earlier than the other players is pretty powerful.
Yeah,
Um,
you're planting a seed. The
yeah.
earlier you plant it, the earlier you can harvest.
Hushed in third monkey you're passing. Daniel has a ton of cash, so I think the players are probably anticipating him going last in priority, and we'll see what he wants to do with this cash. He buys an SFTG. You're selling out of the IRSFF, probably realizing that you were on the hook for a presidency there that you may not actually have wanted, and are going to avoid that. You buy an SFTG as well.
Yeah, I
Daniel,
think I was actually deciding between selling one or two IRSFF
that's fair.
because getting out of the $100 was looking pretty attractive.
It is going to have pretty good revenue now that it has two trains.
Hmm.
So I think I'm with you on holding on to one share. You probably don't want the presidency, but the revenues can be good.
Another neat thing about selling one share and having 95 is I can see the SFTGs at 130, and I'm not sure what Daniel's going to do. And if Daniel sells 2 shares, it goes down to 103. And then if I sell an IRSFF, I will have 103.
Okay,
So if it put me at less than 103, I might have sold both. But then if things go a different way, then I'm sitting on $100 I can't spend. So,
sure.
it's always, you're min maxing, you're trying to figure out what the worst case scenario is.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like I like the way you think, and you're kind of looking ahead at your liquidity to see what shares you could potentially buy. That's something that I should be better about, but that's a good point. Um,
Daniel is one of the best players I've ever played with at managing a portfolio. So, he and I have gone through the ringer, and I'm sure that I'm a better player in the stock rounds than I used to be on account of that.
well, that's why you you play a lot and you pick up on these things. That's good.
Yeah.
Titan Rich, kind of out of options. You are probably just waiting to see what Daniel does at this point. Hushed, he buys a cheap SSFL, and he buys that from the market, but not going to be able to clear the market. Third Monkey Passing, Daniel, he buys another SFTG. So we're sitting at two split presidencies, the SFTG and the SFTN, kind of the sister companies. And at this point, now that he has 3 shares of it, I think it's probably less likely that he sells out, would you say? Or do you think
Um,
he's just going to
I
really
think
trash it?
that it feels really nice to hold on to those shares. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be very tempted to just keep them for the whole game.
All right. Well, let's go through and see what he does. He actually sells them all, so we were off. Um,
Yeah.
well, this is good news for you. You get
Yeah, at
to.
least I get a third share of it, which I'm very happy about.
It does probably hurt you a little bit that you were holding 2 shares when it got trashed like that, though. Um, but
So I basically I got to get in. I'm planning to get into the SFG for the long term, and if I don't buy them, then maybe they never get sold, and I don't get them at all. So
that's
it's
fair.
just one of those risks you open yourself up to. I mean, it's like buying stock in the real world.
Yeah,
If you don't buy it, well, you can. Maybe it just goes up, and you missed out.
that's fair. Daniel, on the other hand, is sitting on a ton of cash and has sold out of the majority of companies in the game. So his
Yeah.
his investment options are a little bit limited. He's looking at the IRSFF or the SFTC. Don't imagine he's eager to invest in the SFTC, so probably going to be putting money into the IRSFF. The problem for him is that this is transparent, so other players can kind of play around this expectation at this point. Um, Having said that, now he's buying the SFTC. But I still am thinking that he's just trashing this company and going to ultimately invest in the IRSFF.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm guessing he's not holding these.
PhysicsSquirrel, you're selling out. You have that $103 that you're talking about, and you buy a SFTG. The other players are passing, with the exception of Daniel, who just trashes it once, and I think we'll be going back for the IRSFF now. Don't imagine he's going to be buying his own AFI shares. Although, to be fair, a little bit extra cash into the company wouldn't be unreasonable, but then he would have to hold on to it. So probably won't see that. And he actually pars a new company. So he now has 2 companies uh, that he's planted, so to speak, on the other players. So he's going to have a lot of flexibility compared to the other players in terms of moving trains and cash around as we approach the later phases of the game because of this. He
Yep.
is going to be forced to put tokens in the conservative zone, and he puts one on Bologna just to secure that Y city location. And he takes the second one, one tile. Oh, sorry. I thought he took it one tile away. He takes it right next to it. When I'm playing, I oftentimes try to space my tokens out to kind of spread across the map as most as possible because the token price depends on where the track tiles sit. So
Mhm.
by putting your tokens one city apart, you can make everybody else pay a lot more. Um, but he doesn't do that in this case. Um, so just a small difference in opinion there, I guess. He's
Well,
able,
consider the fact that he personally bought those shares. he cares about how the company's revenue looks because he has a stake. A lot
Sure.
of times when you start in the conservative zone, you have no stake in the company. You don't care if it ever pays dividends.
That's
But
fair.
he actually wants this company to be good,
That said, I
which is
still,
completely different from a. Yeah, you could still argue that he should take two separated tokens so that when they both lay track, all of the other conservative zone locations will cost 100.
mhm.
That's definitely an argument. Yeah.
And I still, I mean, this is unfair because I know how this game goes. But if I'm in this game, I still am anticipating him suitcasing this company temporarily. Like, I don't think that this
Mm,
company is going to immediately get off to the races. Um, I could be wrong.
okay.
I don't actually remember. But
Yeah.
I, 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 I think that that's still a thought. Um,
I expect him to try to run the company
okay.
despite how much it stretches out his position. He's putting himself in a precarious position, but he is ahead on raising money. So I think he just thinks he'll make it work somehow.
Okay.
But it's he opens himself quite up to having two companies with routes instead of only one.
Yeah.
That is a real liability.
Yeah, I mean the train rush in this game is notoriously quick, so you
Yep.
need to make
The
sure
eight
that
trains often come out in the fifth or sixth OR of the game.
yeah. So you need to make sure you know where your trains are coming from if you give yourself routes. But we'll see how he develops this. Um, he buys tokens. He buys three of them, and they are only $25. And he still has cash for a share. So let's see what he does. Everybody else is passing, and he buys the IRSFF, but now he's out of cash. So I think we will just pass into the OR at this point.
Yeah, seems likely.
And we do. So the AFI is up, and one thing to pay attention to with these new companies floating is where is the four train going to break? So the two new companies that he floated are the first to operate. In theory, he could try and bring out a four train early and just have everybody else's twos rust, which would be pretty devastating for you on the SFMA, which you'd have to emergency buy a four, and that would be maybe lights out for you. The problem for him is that there's two three trains left, so it's going to be I think impossible for him to actually do that. But I'm sure he would if he could. Um, the AFI is one of his child companies, and the AFI is in Genova, so could lay itself track, but will actually not have a route because these port cities don't count as valid revenue locations for the train requirement. So let's see what he does here. He does give himself some track, maybe hoping to eventually run into Cuneo and Torino, and he will be buying a through train. But unfortunately for him, as we mentioned, this company is not ripe, so to speak, and cannot issue shares, cannot buy additional trains just yet. So we
This
will,
track lay, what it tells me is that he intends to merge with the SFTN.
with the SFTN, through the mountain pass in Alessandria.
Either through the Alessandria or through Cuneo.
Oh, I
But
see. When the Cuneo upgrades, sure.
yeah, but if he's not planning on merging, I'm less inclined. I mean, I don't want to route, right?
Yeah. And he's still, I mean, to be fair, he's still pretty secure against having a route for the foreseeable future, even with this track lay. The only downside is that he paid money to lay the track. Um,
Right.
all right. So that's the operation of the AFI and has completed its operation. So in the next operation, can issue shares to start yet another daughter company, which is kind of the MacGuffin in 1841, but will not be able to use that money for trains, at least not in the next operating round. CTS is up, his other company, and he does give himself a route. So when I was looking at this, I was surprised by this. I didn't have the insight that you did that he would be likely to be running this company. What is more common is for a company to start a second company in the conservative zone and then to just lay track, but not actually give themselves a route. So this is a little bit unusual.
It's out of the ordinary. Yep.
Yeah. But he does have the money for a three train, and he is forced to buy it. He actually buys it
He
out of the
actually
AFI.
doesn't buy a three train. He buys one from the AFI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is slowing the
I
game
thought
down.
he might buy the new three train to allow the SFGG to buy a four. And I would have to look more closely to see why he doesn't do that. Maybe he thought it was too good for the SFTG to run its twos and buy a four. Personally, I think it's already too good that he gets to run its twos in the first place.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah, so I was kind of expecting him to engineer a way for himself to like emergency buy a four train, even though he didn't technically have the cash. Um,
Um,
but because there's two threes, he's not able to
he's
pull it
not able
off.
to.
Yeah, so that's a big deal. Um,
Yep.
IRSFF is up and now has two trains, so is able to double tap Milan and has pretty darn good revenue. Um, but unfortunately for Hushed, he only owns 20% of the company. So a bunch of money going to the company, but not very much going to his personal coffers.
Hmm.
He buys an SSFL and neglects to issue any shares, is just going to be sitting in the RSFF for now. SFTG, as you noted, is unable to break into the fours, but we are in the threes, so he could start heading over to Milan for the revenue, which is what he does. And he runs three trains with the SFTG. This is why this company is so highly valued in the auction, just because its revenue in green can be pretty monstrous. But unfortunately for him, and fortunately for you, this is a split presidency, so he's not getting
Yeah.
a whole lot of this.
This is glorious that I have three of these shares.
Yeah, this
My only fear is that I have an existential, threat to my position in the next stock round, and I'm forced to sell them, which is what Daniel was hoping when he depressed the share value of the company.
yeah. But for now, things are looking up for you.
Yeah.
SFTG has not had to issue any shares, but does have a pretty full treasury here, so could potentially see him float a child company. We'll see if he
I only
decides to.
expect he will. We'll see.
He does.
Hmm.
ATFA, and that company is going on Parma. It's paying a little bit more for its token than it would have if the CTS didn't float, but a little bit less than it could have been forced to pay.
Yep.
So I guess counting its lucky stars in that sense.
Yep. You might normally see it take two token spots, but here he only takes one because a second one would force the token price up to 100 from 50.
Yep. And he would be paying twice that 100 twice. So it's
Yep.
actually a very significant difference in cost.
Yep.
Um,
And he in fact chooses to buy three tokens, which means if he wanted three tokens, that's $150 savings.
yeah. So he has a much healthier treasury than he otherwise would have. We are now onto the SFTC. SFTC has better routes and has trains to run those routes now. So things are there's a silver lining for Titan Rich, who has otherwise been um, victimized by the other players at the table so far. um, he upgrades Cuneo, no surprises there. We'll eventually probably see him heading over to towards Genoa, I would assume, but it's going to take him a while to get there. And he has opened up a token location here for the SFTN player. SFTN was going to be able to potentially snag that either way, um, but that's track that the SFTN is happy to see, I'm sure.
Yeah. And especially if Daniel did have the plan of merging the SFTN with the AFI, someone else paying the $50 and the track laid upgrade Cuneo is exactly what you are, very happy to see.
Absolutely. The SFTC has laid a ton of track for that eventuality, if that were his ultimate goal.
Yeah.
SFTC pays out. That concludes the operation of the SFTC, and we are on to the Tuscan company, SSFL. And he upgrades Florence, no real surprise there. Can, in theory, lay up a track into Rome, which we may see just for the purpose of eventually developing that route. But Rome is a really poor revenue center until late in the game. So instead, just kind of min maxing his runs, has two runs into Florence now, and is running for 270, which is, I think, just behind what the IRSFF was running for, or the SFTG. Let's see. Yeah, so pretty good for the SSFL. Still has treasury shares, but unfortunately the share price has been depressed to such a point that the SFLI is going to struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
So he pays that out, gets a little more cash from those treasury shares, and is not in a position to buy the three train either. So passes. SFTN, single train in this company. I don't think I appreciated that until just now, but he is um, losing a little bit compared to the SFTG and the RSFF just because he doesn't have the trains to take advantage of all this great track. Um, he might buy a train out of the CTS. Does the CTS have two trains? No.
It does not.
And it has a
And
route, so probably wants to.
I'm wondering if he was hoping when he didn't buy the second three in the CTS. I wonder if he was hoping that someone else would buy the three and thought that perhaps he could buy the four in the SFTN.
Yeah, but not to be.
Nope.
So he upgrades the DIT. I think you are on the money when you're saying that he's hoping to link up the AFI and the SFTN. He
Hmm.
does need to worry a little bit about the SFTG. Does the SFTG have a token? It does. It has two tokens. So a token in Cuneo from the SFTG may put a wrench in this. We'll see if he gets away with it. He, oh, I see. He drops the token now. Okay.
Yeah, he's thinking about that.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
And he doesn't have a loose token for Milan. So he's basically saying, I need to connect with the AFI.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give up the tempo on Milan.
He's committed. The tokens in Milan are nice, but at the end of the day, I think you really just want to run to Milan, not necessarily through it. Um,
Yep.
I mean, a run through
Running
Milan
through it's very nice, but running to it is, you know,
can
the
be,
best thing that he cares about now.
yeah,
The route from Marseille to Milan is a fantastic four train.
yep. So he's snagged that, and he's paying out. He does buy that last three, so he tried to avoid it. But now the fours are available.
Yeah. Imagine running a two train for 180.
It's a good life. Um,
Hmm.
and that's what you're going to be looking at here. Actually, 200 it looks like. Um, 210 even. All right. So you pay that out and are unable
What
to
was
buy
the 210? I'm sorry.
because you paid out one.
Oh, the SFMA.
Yeah. So you're paying 220 per share, which is
Ah, yes, yeah,
pretty
110.
good.
Yep.
You're not able to do much here with the SFMA, and we're into 3.2. So first operation of the SFTG's daughter company, and it looks like they will have the opportunity to bring out the four. Um, may want to shuffle some money into the SFTG before these two trains rust. So could see that happen. Let's see. Don't imagine that he's going to be eager to give the ATFA a run. One thing that is interesting, because the CTS has given itself a run, the ATFA may be at risk of falling into a run it's not eager to have. So oftentimes in 41, you'll have a bunch of companies sitting right next to each other in this conservative region, and none of them want to give themselves or their neighbors runs. So everybody's just kind of sitting around on their suitcases. But in this case, since the CTS is Daniel's personally owned company and has already given itself a run, that algorithm may or that heuristic may not hold true in this game. I think it's something you at least have to consider if you're the
Yep.
president.
Yeah, it's always very important to keep in mind whether you have a route, whether someone else can give you a route, and whether you can give yourself a route.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that is really not talked very much about in 1841 is the track in the tile game. We all get so focused on all the financial shenanigans, and that is, a key part of the game. But there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with the tokens and tiles in this game. There's two green tiles for each city in each orientation, and with two holes, I should say. And then there's only one hole green tile. Um, for I'm not phrasing this correctly, but there's two whole cities and one whole cities in green, and there's one tile that has one hole for each orientation. So if you're able to lock down brown tiles later in the game, that green tile could be, a bottleneck for the entire game, which is pretty powerful. Um, so the ATFA buys the two train out of the SFTG as expected, and then buys the four. And this is where the game kind of goes crazy for a minute, because you have
Yep.
two events happening in close succession, and they can have very significant repercussions for the entire game. So the first thing that happens is the IRSFF breaks apart into the SFL in Milan and the SB in Venice, and Anybody with two shares, well, not anybody, but if you have two shares in the IRSFF, you're going to probably end up with one of those presidencies, and you have your choice, or I guess Hushed has his choice of which of those is going to be. We already talked about this, but the SFL has great track, but is very poor, and the SB has much worse track, but has much more potential in terms of trains and that kind of thing. So he has actually engineered a situation which I thought was clever, but potentially very risky, where he's going to end up with both presidencies, but one of those presidencies is going to be owned by his other company.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's
It's
interesting.
crazy.
Well, it's interesting. It's risky because he's got a ton of train liability facing down a
Yeah.
very aggressive train rush.
And
The
I mean crazy interesting. I don't mean crazy
Yeah,
stupid, to be clear, but
yeah,
this is a fantastic thing that you don't usually see.
yeah. It's really cool. The
Mhm.
SB is in some sense safe in that it doesn't have any runs, but in this game it's very easy to teleport across the map and give companies runs, so it's not that
Yep.
safe. Um, so we'll see how it plays out for him. He's going to take the SFL presidency for himself, and then he gives the SB presidency to his other company, and then I believe he buys another share. He buys a share for the SB. And I think I could be wrong, but I think the reason he does this is because if you have a presidency that's only held by another company, it's vulnerable in the stock round. Whoever is going ahead of you in priority can, in theory, steal that company. So by buying a share in the SB, he's basically safeguarding himself from losing that presidency. Now, whether or not he really wants to save that presidency, or if he'd be happy for someone else to steal it, um, is a point that could be debated. But I think that's why he makes this decision.
Which presidency are we talking about?
The SB. So he took an SB share. Am I misreading this? I think I misread this.
Trying to
Sorry.
see.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Daniel took it. All right. I'm sorry. Um,
Daniel chose to take an SB share. So I think Daniel is trying to give himself the option to get dibs on the SB in the stock round, or maybe he only is buying it because it has a three train, and perhaps Hushed will choose to lay track and pay out.
yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think that's. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation based on how he's been playing the SB so far.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but you're
But at the
correct.
very least, neither of them is going to generate a dividend, and Daniel has to pick one or the other, and is probably going to sell the share in the stock round.
Okay. So now everybody has the opportunity to change their shares over, and I think most of them choose the SFL. So the SFTT does, and no one looks to be eager to buy any of these shares. So now we are getting towards the merger, and I'm just passing through this quickly.
It may be confusing because there is a bug here.
Um, Correct, but I don't think we're. So now we're in the Tuscan merger. So the
Right.
bug,
Once,
yeah,
yeah.
the bug that we've been alluding to is that PhysicsSquirrel is given. Well, there's actually two bugs, I guess. PhysicsSquirrel is given the option of, or given the responsibility of running the Tuscan merge, and it shouldn't be that way because the SSFL is operating at 70 and the SFMA is also operating at 70, but the SSFL is more to the right. So it's kind of a general truism for 18xx that running to the right is a tiebreaker. So we really should be seeing the SSFL president running this merger. And it
Yep.
also becomes relevant in just a moment during share exchange. Um, but
So it's initially going to give me the option to do a special share purchase action to trade up to the presidency. And it's going to give me a second chance to buy that share later. And this is all, it's all going to look very strange. But that first option, it shouldn't have been given to me. So I intentionally declined, even though I could have taken over the company
yeah,
because I shouldn't have been allowed to.
so I was going to ask you, did you talk about this with the players and just decide to play it straight, so to speak?
Yeah,
Rather than, yeah,
yeah.
okay,
I don't remember if I actually mentioned it. It looks like I didn't mention it during the game, but I think I talked to Hushed afterwards and said, "Hey, it gave me the option to take over the company," and I just passed because it was a bug.
yeah. So So the Tuscan merger is kind of a very complicated game event, and there's a bunch of different scenarios for how this can occur based on which companies have floated. Um, in this case, the minor company is growing up, and then there's a major company merger between the two companies following that. So as part of the transformation, um, you have the option of buying a additional share
Oh,
in
right.
the
I'm confused
CFC.
too. I'm
Um,
not. I've actually never played with this rule where you where that grow up lets players buy shares. It never occurred to me that that was allowed, but that's how it's implemented on the site. So um,
yes.
maybe I declined that option for that reason. I don't recall.
But that's actually by the rules. So
Yeah.
that part is actually not a bug. There will
No.
be a bug later on during the major company
Right.
merge.
Yep. I was
Um,
confused. Yep.
um, but you could have legitimately stolen the presidency of the SFLI here by buying additional shares in the CFC. But you do not do that. Um,
I could only have bought one share, I believe. Could I have bought two? Maybe I could
uh,
have bought two.
I believe that you could.
Yeah.
So there was a first
Okay.
round of share purchases, and then you could have bought a second one here.
Okay.
These
Yeah.
rules become kind of very arcane. It's we're really kind of in edge cases here, um,
Yeah.
but I think it is technically possible for you to steal the SFLI here. Um, Whether or not you want to remains to be seen, which is another very interesting part of this game. Um, so the CFC is formed just temporarily as a holding company, and then the CFC and the SSFL merge together to form the SFLI. So here's where the bug is, where you're given the options of exchanging your shares
Right.
before
Okay.
Hushed is. But you
Yep.
actually do not, as you alluded to, you do not take advantage of this bug, which is very sportingly of you. And Hushed ends up being the president of the SFLI. The important thing to note here is that this is all kind of moot in some sense because you end up with a split presidency of 20% each, and you're operating ahead of Hushed um,
The stock
in
round.
the stock round. And
Yep.
I thought this was very clever. Is this something that you had planned in advance? I assume it must be. Um,
Um, I don't think I was glad that I had priority. The fact that he is sitting directly after me means that I will always get to sell the shares before him or buy up a share. So I believe that I was aware that I might get this opportunity.
okay. Yeah, I mean it's very clever play, and it's compounded by the fact that the SFLI ends up with the presidency of the SB, which is
Right. Yep.
highly unusual. Um,
Yeah.
So regardless, because of your exchange, you're going to end up with a split presidency. 20% of the SFLI goes to both of you, and we'll see how that works out. So Hushed is in a very rough position now because he's got all the capital of the RSFF in the SB, and he's got all the capital of the Tuscan companies in the SFLI. And you're in a position where
Mhm.
you can steal all of that
All of it.
with a single share
Yep.
purchase, which is
Mhm.
incredibly powerful. Um,
Yep.
so, I mean, hopefully we're not, you know, getting too far ahead of ourselves, but that is a really nice opportunity for you. Um,
Mhm.
so we are now finishing the rest of the Tuscan merger, and there's some minutia that occurs with tokens here, but we will just end our discussion of the two events in the game and move forward. So AFI is now operating, has lost I believe it lost a train when the CTS bought it out of it, and we'll see if he elects to give himself a run here or not. He does. So this is the situation that we were talking about where we're thinking he's probably wanting to merge with the SFTN. Um, and he actually, what is
Oh,
he?
wow.
Emergency buying a
He,
train?
yeah.
Yeah.
He sells four shares at half price to buy a four.
Yeah. So that's interesting, right? Because he could have bought the train across and then merged to eliminate the train liability. He would lose the
Yeah.
run on the SFTN by doing that, um, but it's pretty costly to link up the way he did. Um, I guess he just wants to accelerate the game. Is he worried that he's falling behind?
I think that the four trains are very strong.
Okay.
If you look at the train roster, there's just There are three expensive fives that are also not permanent.
Yeah,
So getting a four at the earliest possible opportunity can be very good. And I think that he simply values getting that four train now instead of later over the loss of the share value.
that's fair.
And the fact that it lets him run his three trains without having to shuffle them is an additional value he gets out of it. So I'm guessing that's the calculus.
That's fair. Um, that said, there's four trains available before he buys one. It seems unlikely to me that all of those are going to go, just looking at the way cash is distributed amongst the companies right now. But maybe that's his fear. Maybe you're right. Regardless, he takes a big hit to emergency buy a non permanent train here and does not ultimately end up merging. Um, CTS is up. He has given himself a run. And my question here is, is he motivated to break the suitcase in Parma? He should be able to do that with two track lays, which he has the tokens for. But instead, he heads down to the Adriatic coast and just improves his run. It is a nice little revenue
Yep.
center, so he's, I guess, prioritizing helping himself rather than hurting another player, which is,
Well, we made it to phase four, so Adriatic is worth 70,
yep,
meaning that he will actually pay out for 130, and his share price is 129. So he gets to move forward because of this.
yeah. And he has 8 shares in the IPO, so his company is going to be, a lot healthier um, with this payout. He issues, and now we're starting to see kind of the beauty slash horror of 1841, where you get these very complicated financial assemblages, um, and it becomes very difficult to follow. So the commentary on the game is going to slow down a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
ICSF gets parred, and he pars that in the remainder of Austria in Mantova. And I assume he picks this because he wants to continue developing kind of a string of tokens for the late game um, from Milan into the Adriatic coast. Because currently he has two independent companies, the SFTN with its daughter in the AFI, and then he has the CTS and now the ICSF. So he's got two financial structures on the east and west of Milan. And I think that he's just hoping to lock down the map and have very good routes for himself. But this is very forward thinking. He's got a lot of work to do before that plan kind of matures. But I think that's what he's thinking about.
Connectivity is very important in this game. If your companies are not connected to each other, they are not allowed to merge. So
Right.
he's wanting to secure the option to merge this company away with the CTS, which he owns shares of.
Yep. Um, he takes a single token, it looks like. Oh, he buys 3 tokens, but he only places one of them. Um,
Yeah, he could have placed another one. I'm not sure why he didn't, but yeah, either way.
yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit confused as well because I guess with the active border, he would be forced to place it in Austria, closer to Venice. So
Yeah,
maybe he didn't.
Verona, Vicenza,
Yeah,
Padova,
maybe
but
he
all
did.
those still cost 25. So he could have.
He could have, but maybe he doesn't value those locations. Maybe
Yeah,
he
those
wants to.
locations are not as useful. Yeah,
Yeah, he wants to hold on to that for Bergamo or potentially Milan or that kind of thing. Maybe.
yeah.
Okay, so SFLI is up and Hushed is still the president.
Mhm.
So for now, so to speak. uh, he links up with Rome and upgrades Livorno, so has a nice little 3 run for himself, 150. As a result of the merge, does have some IPO shares again, and has enough money for a 4 train, which he picks up. Going to have pretty nice runs down here, at least until that 5 train comes out, which is looking pretty eminent. He doesn't sell any shares and is just going to buy a SB share. So kind of solidifying his hold on this company. Um, Again, we mentioned that with Daniel buying an SB share, it could in theory be stolen away from the SFLI, but I don't know that that's the real risk in this upcoming stock round for Hushed. SB has a ton of cash and probably wants to try and consolidate cash and not leave his cash spread out so over so many presidencies. but I think he continues the suitcase here. He does. Buys the
So
last.
buying this SB share does give the SB $350.
Okay, fair enough. So that allows him to buy the last four. Yeah. And he's selling an SFLI
Yeah, he's required to by the rules. The
because
SFLI is
okay,
the parent of the SB.
it's a circular
Yep.
chain. Yeah. SFL is up now, and I imagine he's going to be buying this train that he just bought with the SB into the
Yep.
SFL.
Gets just a bit of value before the SFLI is wrested from his hands.
Well, that and the SB, yeah. Um,
Right.
so he is able to kind of extract the value out of the RSFF descendants in this manner, and has the SFL, which has great track and now has a decent train. Still in a little bit of danger here. He doesn't have a whole lot of cash in the SFL. He's able to
Yeah.
buy another train out of the SFLI. So I think he's probably aware that there's a risk here that he's going to lose the SFLI.
Yeah. But there's a reason he doesn't buy both fours out of the SFLI, and that is that if he does, I just will sell the shares, and then he will have moved all the fours into a company that can't run them.
Yeah, um, that's fair. And then I guess he runs the risk of being train locked with four trains. Um, is
Well, he owns
this?
shares of the SFLI, so he would like it to pay out if he has to be the president.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, he doesn't want to leave it with just a three that's going to rust.
Yeah, he's got the very unfortunate situation that a lot of kids are placed in when their parents tell them to cut the cookie and let the other sibling choose the half. I have the choice of whether to take over the SFLI, so he has to decide what to leave it with
Right.
because I can choose to leave it with him or I can take it from him.
Yeah.
It's a very privileged position for me and an awkward predicament for him.
I like your analogy. It took me a second, but I see where you're going with it. That's nice. Um, all right. So SFL buys an SFTN, and the SFTG is up. He's sad that all of his two trains have rusted, but he's given the consolation prize of a token in Milan, which he snags. And you know what? A revenue of 220 with just a single train, not too shabby. So he pays that out, and he does not have the cash for a five train, so it's just going to be sitting on this three for now. He buys a four from his child company,
Right.
and that child company is still at risk of potentially getting a route it doesn't want. So not entirely safe there. SFTG buys an SFL. SFL, two trains, is going to be running like a monster. As long as that five train doesn't come out, which is that looking likely? Let's see. Uh,
Even if it does come out, you still got a four.
yeah, but it's
And I mean,
a lot
zoom
better.
out a little bit. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 companies. And when that five gets bought, there will be five trains that exist. So you would like to have shares of the companies that do have a train.
Sure. Yep. And that five train is definitely coming out. The ICSF has more than enough money, and nobody's going to be able to change operating order very well.
Yeah.
Okay. So SFTG is done. SFTC, on the other hand, is in a pretty precarious situation. Going to have to issue a bunch of shares probably if it wants to get a permanent train, not a permanent train, but a five train. And
Yeah.
I don't know, is it possible for him to do that? I haven't done the math. It would be close. It's going to
I
be,
don't think he can afford a five train right now. He's
yeah,
running his three for 210, so no, not enough.
yeah,
But if you recall, two operating rounds ago in SR2, I advised the SFTC should have sold his shares for 100, and the shares have not crept back up to that price yet.
that's
So
fair.
he might be wishing that he had done that.
Yeah. He's starting to head over to Alessandria. We'll see if he's able to get a token there or not. Going to take him a while, of course. He doesn't take any stock actions with the company, so is setting himself up for a little bit of misery into the next operating round. SFTN, single train, he is just upgrading DITs, and he also, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what these track lays are accomplishing. Um, he has the token in Torino, so I'm not entirely sure why he's looking at bypassing it.
Yeah, I feel like he's just kind of blocked in and doesn't have much to do, but I'm
Yeah,
not sure why he didn't do He probably could have found something more useful to do.
Yeah. Sometimes I get really caught in the minutia of track lays and I forget that players are human and they just sometimes do things to
Yeah. I
push
mean, it's also
buttons.
easy to overthink because
Yeah,
his track lays are not that high value right now.
exactly. Runs his train, pays it out, and buys an SFLI. Sorry, sells an SFLI.
Oh, that's a much better way to trade with that company. Those shares ain't good.
The SFLI shares.
Yeah, I mean, they're not bad, but they're expensive. You'd rather have the cash.
Fair enough.
My mantra in 1841 is buy low, sell high,
It seems
and merge up when possible.
generally wise. He buys his own daughter company. Is this just an example of him being a little bit worried that he could potentially lose that presidency?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay. We're into the stock round, and Titan Rich is going to be leading us off, but he's been kind of gradually sinking into the background in terms of viability, and then you will be up. So he buys an SFL. SFL is going to be a great company, and you're up now, and you just go ahead and pull the trigger on the SFLI. So we were talking a little bit about how Hushed had to make a decision, what to leave in this company, and I guess you did your math and decided that he had left you enough that you were going to take it. Um, when I'm looking at it,
Yeah,
SFLI, unlikely that you're going to be running that through train, but you have pretty healthy treasury. You have legs, so to speak, in terms of
yeah,
affording permanent trains, and the map position of the SFLI at this point, um, not terrible. I mean,
it's fine.
you have
Yeah.
a lot of track developed, so yeah, why not?
There's an interesting note here about the AFI. We were wondering why he issued shares to Biofor. I was wondering why he didn't merge, but now I'm looking at it now. Um, Keeping the AFI's value high and merging, might have backfired because I have 3 shares to his 4. I could trade up to a second share on the merge, and I had priority over him, and I could have then
Stole that.
taken over the company.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, that's part of the problem with doing commentary in this game is just there's so many options
yeah.
to
There's
consider.
so much to potentially talk about. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, Regardless, you didn't take that option, but you do take the SFLI, which is, I
yeah.
think, pretty strong. Um, so you started with the SFMA and ended up with the SFLI despite despite all odds. Maybe
Yeah.
despite your best intentions, but here you are.
Despite being very non-committal initially.
Yeah. Hushed is now in a rough spot, and he is continuing to invest in his own SFL, but we probably should anticipate this SFL being a split presidency. I think it's a pretty attractive investment, pretty cheap. So, Third Monkey buying the SFTG. Daniel, he's selling his SB and he buys the SFL. And will we just see a float storm on the SFL now? Looks like,
Well, a purchase storm anyway.
yeah, a purchase storm. Fair enough. Company was floated long ago. Uh,
Yeah.
you buy your share. That company is sold out. So Hushed is um, probably not too happy. He went from the IRSF president to just barely the majority president of the SFL and
Yeah.
lost a lot of the assets of the IRSFF as a result of
Mm.
losing the SFLI.
Yeah.
Um, he goes back and buys an SFLI, so he's pressuring your presidency, but this should
Hmm.
be something that you can pretty easily defend. Um,
Yep.
Third Monkey, he's buying a CTS. CTS, of course, is Daniel's second floated company, and Daniel has money to defend this, so doesn't have to worry too much. He buys his CTS from the market. Titan Rich, probably last share for him. He is buying the CTS as well. Why are players prioritizing the CTS here? Um, its revenue is not going to be that good. Is it just because it's
Well,
fairly
players
cheap?
they're looking for value. If you look at the game state, the SFTN is sold out, the SFTG is sold out, the SFL is sold out, the SB has no route and no train. The SFLI is $141.
Yeah.
People are just looking for value.
So it's just the
And the
cheap
CTS
shares.
and the SFTC are the cheap shares. The CTS is a bit cheaper, and its president has a bit more game control. The SFTC is stuck in a corner and might very well go bankrupt. So the CTS is just the best share right now,
Well,
mediocre as it might be. Look,
yeah, so I hear you. The counterpoint to that is that this five train is coming out. The CTS is not going to be running for one operating round, I don't think. Um,
yep, that
so,
might be true.
all right,
That said, it could merge up with the ICSF, and then that $86 investment becomes worth potentially 153 if it merges to 306, or 121 if it merges to 242. And either way, you make a profit. So
fair,
it's probably better than cash to hold one share. It might not be better, but it's probably better than
fair.
cash.
Yep, the merge is a key factor here. So I imagine you sell and defend your SFLI here. You do.
Yeah, it looks like I sold. Why did I sell?
You sold the
Did I
SFL.
need to buy the share?
Yeah, you only had
Maybe I had
140.
to.
You were $1 short.
Oh
Um,
my goodness, I was a dollar short. Okay, yeah.
that's painful.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
and then you reap the reward of operating right ahead of Hushed for the purposes of stealing the SFLI, but on the counter to that, he now gets that cheap SFL share that you've sold.
Oh yeah, he got compensated by pushing me.
Yep.
Yep, he got the SFL.
So that was a nice little jab from him as payback for you stealing his company.
Yeah, you
uh,
get value where you can.
yep. Third monkey, he is buying the CTS still,
Hmm.
and Daniel, he continues to buy CTS as well. Titan Rich out of cash. You are functionally out of cash as well. Are there any shares that you'd want to buy here? Probably not. You do buy an SB. Okay. Um,
Yeah, I guess I want to reserve the right to take it over next stock round.
yeah. All right. Hushed. He buys the last CTS, and I think Daniel's the only one with cash to do anything. Oh, actually, there was a CTS left. I missed that. So he ends up with 5 shares in the CTS. He's happy about that. Um, and I think everybody just passes now. So I like to pause at certain points of the game and just evaluate, the overall standings and who's in the strongest position here. And I gotta say, Daniel looks pretty darn good here. He's got
Mhm.
two independent systems, if I want to borrow a term from other genres of 18xx, um,
Mhm.
and two of his trains are going to be rusting, but he's got a pretty commanding treasury, or I guess cash at his disposal to dictate how trains break, and he's got a ton
Mhm.
of track points with 4 presidencies. So
Yeah,
I think he's probably my favorite to win at this point. Um,
he's got the most control. He's the player that I am most worried about.
yeah,
The other players, if we look at them one by one, Hushed with the SFL does not really have a future. He's got to figure out a way to get a permanent train, and the best I can see is he either withholds and hopes to get a 6 for 800, or he starts a company and then has to merge with it. And both of those are fairly unattractive. Withholding and merging to have your shares are both not super attractive in this position.
yeah, he
Um,
dilutes his position by merging, I guess,
yeah,
and he's already a pretty
eh,
weak president.
yeah. And then Titan Rich looks dead.
Yeah,
He doesn't have a 4 train, which means when the 5 comes out, he's going to have to issue all his shares for half price to buy the 5, and then he'll have a broke company with a 5. And then whenever the 8 comes out, he will be bankrupt.
yeah. Um, my perception of his position has been colored because I know how things work out. But
Mm,
I agree with you. I think even as a de novo look at this game, he's in objectively a very weak
yeah,
position. Um,
yeah.
and then third monkey, he's the SFTG player. His position's a little bit better than Hushed, just because he already
Mhm.
has the ATFA um, and can issue those shares I think, in this operating round. So he'll
His
be able.
advantage is those 5 shares are 5 real shares. They probably won't have to merge. So
Right.
if you look at his portfolio, he's only got 8 shares to my 11 and Daniel's 10,
Hmm.
but 5 of those shares are real shares. They're not eventual half shares.
Right. That's fair. And then your position in the game, just rounding us out, is okay. You have the SFLI, you have some shares in the treasury to obtain a permanent train. You have a 4 train already, so you're not going to be falling back trainless. I think your liability here is this SB. The SB is not able to merge away. This is a problem that is going to be yours to deal with for better or worse. And you don't really have a ready-made track, towards Milan or another revenue center. You're pretty powerful down south around Rome, but you got your work cut out for you to develop,
Yeah.
a late game run. So You're probably in second, maybe third place, I would say, in terms of strength.
I think that I'm in first, maybe second, and here's why.
Okay.
Um, I have 30% of Daniel's best company, and I have 30% of Third Monkey's best company.
Okay. Fair enough. So your
So if
portfolio,
you,
yeah.
my portfolio is very good.
Okay.
From my perspective, as long as I can survive, I'm hoping to have the best portfolio. And so I'm worried about Daniel. I'm less worried about Third Monkey because I have 3 shares to his 5. Um, so it's unclear. I think that Daniel's position and my position are both strong, and that they're both very complicated.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that you have a fairly tenuous position in terms of train liability, I guess.
Yes,
Um,
yes, that is a
so
problem.
so your comment that you're in a good position if you can survive, I think hits the nail on the head.
Yeah, right. That's true. That's true.
You're
So yeah, no, third, maybe second is probably fair.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Your portfolio, if the game extends to the late and you're able to, just maintain your holdings, is going to win you the game. But there's an open question of whether or not we're able to see you get there.
yeah.
Um, all right, so we're into the operating round. ICSF is up, and this is Daniel's company, owned by the CTS. So imagine we'll be seeing a 5 come out here. Let's see. He lays some track, just preparing to link up his runs and eventually get over into Milan, and shuffling trains, just to get a little more cash into the CTS, consolidate his holdings, and then he rusts the threes. So finally, all those pesky borders are gone, and we are into the early late game, I would say. SFTC is in a
Mm,
rough spot, and I think everybody else has at least one four train to, hang their hat on for now.
yeah.
Um, ATFA, he does not have any routes, and we'll see if he issues and floats a company or not here. He's going to head over to Milan, but not able to link up just yet, which is bad news for him because I'm sure he'd like to get a token there, but no guarantee he does. Um, and he does issue shares. And what does he do with that money? So nothing. Interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
I was surprised. I thought he would float a company there.
yeah, I think you kind of have to. Um, yeah, he has a ton of cash now when permanent trains become available, but he's not going to have any role in kind of pushing trains, and he also is losing out on track development. All right. So he just issues, and we'll just see how that plays out for him. SFLI, your company is up, and you're heading over to Genova. Going to take you a while to get there, and it is expensive. But for now, running your 4 train for 180, and you pay that out. You issue, and will you be floating here? You don't have much cash, so it's going to be,
I have 670 and not
yeah,
680.
that's rough. Can't buy,
Oh, but I have an SFL share. Looks like I can
so
sell.
you can sell, okay. Which you do, and that gives you enough to float for that 340. You take the RSFS, and I think you choose the locations you do
Hmm.
because you're well aware of that liability
Yeah, you're
in the
talking about my
SD.
SV problem, and I'm like, I know what I would do here.
Yeah,
And it turns out that is what I do.
yeah. So you protect it by teleporting across the map, and I think have addressed the concern that I raised and are in a much, much stronger position now than you had been.
Yep.
Uh, AFI, he upgrades Genova, um, gets a little bit of a better run, but still has not merged with the SFTN, which we were expecting a while ago. So does he do it here? Um, Looks like he does. Okay. So he has a nice run to the west of Milan now. And this is where I struggle when everybody starts exchanging shares. I usually just kind of skip to the last part and then
Yeah, exactly. Look
look
at
at
entities and just see who has what.
how's it's ended up. Um, so he's simplified his his portfolio a little bit, and It looks like he probably shook off a few of his kind of parasitic investors.
I was just shy of affording the trade up, so now he doesn't have to worry about me stealing the company in the stock round. So that was a very important timing to
Yeah.
do that merge before I could get more money.
Yep. And that's kind of a hidden benefit of merging is that oftentimes you can, shake people out of your company one way or the other. Um, it's not guaranteed, of
Yep.
course, but
Yeah.
it is a option for you. All right, so
Yeah.
he has merged two of his companies, has a little bit less train liability, and we are on to the SFTG. SFTG upgrades Torino, so could have upgraded Milan here, but maybe not eager to open up a token slot for other players. Otherwise, I mean, the revenue is strictly better if he upgrades Milan, right?
Hmm.
Okay. Runs his 4 train, pays that out, and does not have money for a 5 train. He buys an ATFA, which is interesting. Does that suggest that he is hoping to run this company?
What it suggests to me is that he's hoping to get to 4 shares of the ATFA because that guarantees that it can't be stolen in a stock round.
Okay, fair enough. Because the president
I don't
could.
know how he's getting the 4th share, but he's gotten the third one now.
Okay. I think even with 3 shares invested, he should feel fairly secure. It would be quite an investment to try and steal this presidency.
Yeah, 3 shares makes people buy one additional share, which is quite a deterrent, but 4 shares makes it impossible.
Yeah. All right. Um, so SFTG is done. CTS now, trainless. Um, but does he link up with his RCSF? He does. Okay. Or
Let's see.
ICSF, sorry.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
he'll buy a 5 train. He actually buys it from, yeah, so he doesn't buy it from the market.
no,
Okay. So he's just sitting on the cash in the CTS.
yeah.
And I
Now remember how I
imagine,
said those CTS shares might be worth $153?
yep.
Yeah,
So I think
here we are.
he's going to be merging them now. And he does. And I will take my own advice and just look at how things end up. So the AFI comes back on the board, and he is left with 2 companies with just 20% presidencies, but his
Yeah.
share value is pretty monstrous, and he has a massive IPO to push trains with now.
And
Um,
one thing to note about both of these mergers that is a bit subtle in the 1841 rules, whenever somebody trades up a share option in a merger, they pay that money to the treasury in exchange for the half share that they're extracting. When someone sells a share, they take that money from the bank, which
okay,
means that the fact that a bunch of people traded down their shares for cash means that the AFI and the IFI just had extra shares appear in their IPO.
right.
So he's got a lot of money to work with when he
Yeah,
issues these shares
a lot of capital.
eventually. Yep.
SFTC, kind of in a death spiral at this point. Still heading towards Alessandria, but going to be a struggle for him to do anything of value, really. Um, not able to run and actually has to emergency sell for half to buy a non permanent 5, which is a pretty bad feeling. SB
Yep.
is up. This is your company via the SFLI, and I assume you continue to suitcase here? You do. You issue your shares. So now the
Yep.
SB is super cheap. And as we've seen with Daniel's companies, you may be incentivized now to merge this later on to get a huge bump in share value if you were to invest in this company. So,
Looks like I was able to afford a company at 216. Incredible.
yeah, you buy the CFCC. CFCC. Oh, I see. You're parring a new company. Yep. Um, so that goes in Vicenza next to Padova. So you're just kind of slowly building a run west um, from the east and Venice. Going to take you a long time to get over to Milan. We'll see if that actually happens. And there's not really a whole lot of synergy between the track you're developing here with the track down south you have with the SFLI. So
Yeah.
we'll
No, I
see.
have very little intention of using these to run routes. It might happen, but they're mostly there for financial control.
Mhm. So
So,
now,
and it blocked up Vicenza, which means it's even harder for someone to give the SD a route that it doesn't want.
right, yeah, now they have to par or float all the way down to Verona or Ferrara to, you know, get anywhere near your companies. So it's you're definitely defending yourself. You do give yourself a token in Brescia, so potentially getting access into Milan a little bit faster that way.
I gotta believe that was a mistake. I think I thought that token would still cost 50, but instead I paid 100 for my tokens.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess the gray tile still counts.
Connected track, yep.
Okay. SFL,
If the gray tile were not connected, it wouldn't count.
fair enough. The one that always gets me is the pass tiles don't count because I see yellow and I
Oh,
assume that they are
yeah, no. They count if they have track on them
right.
that's connected to a city, but
Right.
otherwise, no.
Yep. SFL is the one to upgrade Milan, runs his four train, and he actually withholds, so he is very cognizant of the risks that you identified of affording a permanent train.
Yep.
And he's just going to sit on this cash, not eager to buy that last five.
Well, there's a reason.
Yeah, he's parring CTS. Um, and he puts that token in Pavia, so he's hoping to snag the token in Milan, but I don't think there's a guarantee that he's able to get that. We'll have to look at
I
the
think he's
operating.
expecting to be forced to merge in order to survive. So I think if he doesn't get the Milan token, that's fine because he's already got one.
Fair. Yeah. He buys three tokens, and we are into 4.2. Now we are into this kind of third generation of daughter companies at this point. Um, RSFS is just laying track. I assume that eventually you'll be developing runs for yourself, but probably not eager to do that prematurely. So you buy a share in the CGTF. Whose company is that? Oh no, you're parring the
Company.
CGTF,
Yep.
and you place
Always.
that in Berzo Aristo. So probably
Yep.
hoping to get into Switzerland and then also just securing a run into Milan. Um,
Hey, I mean, slim pickings, not a lot of spots left. I think I picked it because it could give itself a route.
yeah, and then you want to emergency buy a train to push
Yep.
trains.
It's
Yeah,
very there's going to be, I'm going to do some foreshadowing in a bit. I make a grave error later with one of my new companies choosing not to lay track.
fair enough. You pay for some fairly expensive tokens, and we're on to CTS. CTS, he lays track in Verona and is just going to be passing for now. So a little bit surprising. I guess, like you said, he already has the token on Milan, so doesn't need to secure that with the CTS just yet. But hmm, I guess he doesn't want to emergency buy that five train either. Okay. AFI, he is gradually making his way over to Milan, running for 150. Is he going to issue shares here? He does not.
He may not because it's the first time the
Oh,
company is
I
operating.
missed that. Okay. And it was the first time it was operating because it was a newly merged company.
Correct.
Yeah, because he had had a company in the East for a while, but he merged it last
That's
operating.
right. Yep.
All right. CFC laying track, but not giving himself a route. Makes sense. Would be a little bit dangerous to give both of your companies routes in one one fell swoop.
Yep.
Um, IFIA, he is cooperating with the AFI basically to get a route into Milan without having to pass through Bergamo, where he could
Oh, he
potentially.
gets the Milan token. What a gift.
He gets it with the IFAI. Yep,
Yep.
very good. He pays out pretty monstrous run with just a four train, but like you were
Yeah.
saying, that run from Milan to Marseille, two pretty nice revenue centers to include.
Yep.
And he buys an SFL, ATFA. This player has a ton of cash, but doesn't have a route yet. Does he want to try and get a route? Looks like he does. And he tokens in Bergamo. So I think that's what Daniel was worried about is tokens ending up in Bergamo and cutting his routes. So he laid that bypass just south of Bergamo for the AFI. And ATFA now has a route. Is he going to buy that last five? He does, and he has cash for the six as well.
Yeah. And this move shocked me. This is where I put him out of contention.
So tell me about that. Why?
Okay. So remember how I said the SFTG, like the biggest benefit of his position is his SFTG shares are whole shares.
Mhm.
They are not anymore.
Because he
He's
has
going to
to
have to merge it
merge.
with the ATFA
Yeah,
most likely because I don't see where his second permanent train is coming from, and he has two companies with routes. So
that's
now
fine.
he needs either a second train or he needs to merge.
Yeah,
Um, and we looked at this last turn when the ATFA chose not to float another company. It just sat on its 1380. And in his position, I would have floated a company last turn and would have made sure I had the means to get multiple permanent trains.
sure.
But he's going to see that this is going to result in not being able to get a second permanent.
Yep, that's fair. Well, he made the decision he made. Breaks through that poison five, so to speak. It feels wrong to talk about a poison five, but it is. It
Nope,
is.
they sure are in this game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, and he buys an SB. So interesting to buy the SB, company that's not going to be running, but again, it is super cheap. So when you
Buy
ultimately,
low.
yeah, when you ultimately merge it, he gets a little bonus from that.
Mhm.
SFLI does not have a permanent train for itself, and those seven trains are kind of staring down the pike, so to speak. Links up with Genova, does have a token he can take advantage of. Links up and is able to get that. So does he have a run from Rome to Marseille now? I believe he does. Yes.
With a four train, one,
Which is
two, three, not quite.
not quite. Oh, because
But
I,
I
I
do
see.
have a run to the Genova port, which is just about as good or
Yeah,
better right now.
fair enough. So 430, pretty good. Unfortunate for you
Yeah,
that there's no IPO shares. So still going to have to find a permanent train, but you have a number of helpers up north that will be able to shuffle trains for you.
yeah. I'm in limbo right now. I got to get this permanent trains somehow.
So the SFLI buys another SB. We've talked about that already. SFTG, this is the other company of
The
the
SFLI
AT.
sold an SB.
Sorry, I keep doing that, misreading it.
Yep.
So the SB shares get a little bit cheaper and will be available in the stock round for players to purchase.
Yeah. This sale is probably motivated by the antitrust rule that says you can't control more than 60% of a company. By selling it, I now have the option to buy up to four shares
Sure.
personally.
Yeah. So to clarify, you cannot control more than 60% of a company either in your other companies or in your presidency, um, which is, I think, what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Yep. SFTG, he's running a four train, gets a token in Como. This section of the map around Switzerland and Lugano is interesting because nobody can ever token in Lugano as a result of this border that never goes away. And then it's interesting, Lugano can only upgrade as a single whole city, but it ends up being irrelevant. So
Yeah.
I just like that little quirk of the map. Runs for 340, which he pays. And he shuffles a permanent train out of the ATFA. But as you kind
Yep.
of discussed, he has two companies and only one permanent train, so it's going to have to
Yeah.
merge.
Yeah. The SFTG looks absolutely fantastic right now if the ATFA did not exist.
SFTC, still no permanent trains, finally gets into Alessandria and actually doesn't token. Okay. Uh, he's able to run
Yeah.
from Marseille to Torino, so a decent run, but he is dead in the water. He's
Yep.
having to withhold, and I think if we look at his portfolio, he's been pretty much exclusively investing in the SFTC. So these withholds are really quite painful.
He sees the writing on the wall, but he's withholding because he knows it's the only way that he could potentially find a way back into the game
Yeah,
without going bankrupt.
it's a long shot. Yeah, going bankrupt and taking the $500 loan might be a more viable strategy. I don't know, but he's in a rough spot. Um,
Yep.
SFL is up. Um, SFL does link up with the CTS, which is his other company. So just kind of working on developing a route for the SFL for the late game, but he still is on the hook for permanent trains. And I mean, his late game run is going to take some work to develop. He's there's two companies with tokens already. There's no guarantee that he's able to get to another offboard. runs for 330, pays it out, and he merges his two companies. This is pretty nice for him in terms of the appreciation of his stock value. But I think everybody else has cash, so they are able to. He's not going to shake them off um,
Yeah,
with this merge. He wasn't able to time it the way Daniel was,
right. But that's okay. The company's more than well enough capitalized.
and we just kind of brushed through the rest of the stock round. The SB didn't do anything of note other than fall back and become even cheaper. So we were in stock round 5, and Titan Rich, we've kind of discussed, really rough spot. PhysicsSquirrel, you are in a good spot, but have some liabilities to handle. Hushed, um, he is the SFL player that is now the ICSF. Um, he's kind of in a rough spot still, too. Um, Third Monkey, you talked about him. His portfolio got trashed, or is going to become trashed. And then Daniel, I still like Daniel's position. He's just in a little bit of a rough spot here because he has two 20% presidencies and is not going to have the funds to defend them if someone wants to pressure them. Um, both of those companies are quite expensive, so it will take a little bit of doing to steal the presidency, but it is possible.
Yeah,
Um, but short of that, I mean, he's got great treasuries and great track. So if he was able to maintain his presidencies, I think he would be a strong contender for the game.
yeah,
Um, so so Titan Rich is up and buys his own SFTC. So I think he's just kind of resigned to his fate. He just is investing in his own dead company. You are up and you buy the SB. So I think you are kind of planning on uh, investing heavily in the SB and then merging up for a huge bump in net worth.
yep,
Hushed, he sells out of the SFLI and buys an RSFS. So probably trying to steal some of your daughter companies and put you in a position where your company has put all of its capital into a company that is then stolen away. But stealing the presidency of the RSFS is going to be a very tall order. Um, so could also just be trashing your shares.
yeah. I suspect that's what he's doing. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be. Actually looking at it, I think he probably cannot steal this company. I don't think he has the, um, look, he can't sell shares to buy it, so he's just trashing. Third Monkey buys an IFAI. Um, IFAI and AFI, confusingly, are owned by the same company, same president, and are the two companies on the east and west of the map. So, just noting their relative position. Daniel, he buys his own IFAI, and as noted, already does not have cash for the AFI, so needs to be a little bit careful. Titan Rich, he is buying his SFTC again. You are continuing to buy SB shares. Everybody's kind of just watching this occur. Hushed, he sells an RSFS, so it does just trash it like we predicted. And he's going back to buy the SB now. So he's paying attention to what you're doing and saying, hey, if the president is a believer in the SB, I am also a believer in the SB.
Yep. Too bad to only get 3 shares.
Third Monkey has cottoned on. Daniel also seeing this, and Titan Rich rounds us out. So as you predicted, only 3 shares. You go back and buy an IFAI, pressuring the presidency again. This is going to force Daniel to defend, I think. Hushed, buying the AFI. So Daniel's being split now. Both of his companies are being invested in, and he can only secure one of them. Third Monkey, second share in the IFAI. Daniel has to buy it. Actually, doesn't have to buy it just yet, but is going to be forced to. So buys it now. Titan Rich, passing. You buy an IFAI, and then do you just sell out here? No. Hushed is now selling out of the AFI and buys an ICSF. Where's the ICFF? This is where I really start to struggle.
306. He's buying his own share now. So he bought the other two companies at 306, and now he's buying his share at 306. And this is presumably because he wants to buy a six train when he operates, and there's only one six left,
Yeah,
and he wants to run first. So he tanked the other two companies that were at that
yeah,
price.
he's just he's changing operating order. This is where I
Mhm.
start to really struggle to maintain the game state.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's really tricky.
Third Monkey, he is sold out of the IFAI. So Daniel has fully invested in the IFAI, and Third Monkey trashes all those shares. So Daniel can't sell them for the same value to defend the AFI. And now Third Monkey's going to go attack the AFI. Bad news for Daniel. Titan Rich, passing. PhysicsSquirrel, buying the SFTC. Is this just because that's kind of what's available? I think,
Um, I think I don't remember. I think that I just because it was a cheap share, and I
yeah,
thought maybe when he goes bankrupt, I might want to control the company.
sure. Hushed buying the ICSF. Hard to pronounce these company names. Um,
Yeah.
Third Monkey, he sells an SFTG to steal the presidency of the AFI, which he does. Daniel then sells out immediately to the AFI. So these two players are stabbing each other and hurting each other's positions, which I think is only good news for you. It's kind of a crabs in a bucket scenario. Um,
I'm not sure what he does with this money, but it might end up being good for him that he's able to sell out of those expensive shares and invest in cheaper ones. We'll have to see.
yeah, so I mean, it looks like he's pressuring your daughter company, and the danger here for you is that if
Oh,
he
I see.
gets the RSFS, he can lay track for the SB before it operates
Oh,
and kind
yeah,
of
but if he couldn't control the AIFAI, I'm guessing he's also not going to take over the RSFS or the AFI. He didn't try to control the AFI with three shares, so he's not going to buy three shares of the RSFS.
that's true.
It's worse and more expensive,
So he'll just trash it.
probably.
Titan Rich buys an SFTG.
And I'm guessing I'm going to sell them now because I was planning to, and now someone else could.
Yep.
We'll see.
So you sell
Yeah.
the SFTG,
Oh, it's
and
ledged. That's why I didn't need to sell them. Yeah. Okay.
now you're buying the IFAI. So going back to your point about your portfolio and just investing in the best companies of everybody else,
Yeah.
this IFAI is going to end up being a split presidency between you and Daniel. And
Yeah. And I pushed him on it now because he could buy a second RSFS and sell both, and I didn't want him to sell both. So I
right,
pushed him and made him buy an IFAI instead.
yep. Hushed is passing. Third Monkey buys an SFTC. Daniel has to go back and defend his IFAI, as you alluded to. Um, Titan Rich, I'm not sure what he's doing, just selling out of his company, buying a better paying share, it looks like. PhysicsSquirrel buying the cheap SFTC.
I remember. I was hoping to buy all up to six shares of this company, but Rich sells out earlier than I was hoping.
You were hoping to buy up 6 shares before he sold out.
I uh, I had this plan that I was hoping to buy to four shares and then say, "Hey, would you like to sell me two shares in a private transaction and give me your liability?" But he decided to
Sell out
sell
first.
down preemptively, and then I didn't get as many shares as I was hoping.
Now, is this a game playing with the variant where you can sell directly from player to player? I don't think
The
it
variant
is.
is well, that's the rule. You're
Oh,
allowed to like that. It's not a variant. That's just how the rule.
so it
Now, for
is it
some reason, it's an optional rule on 18xx games, but
correct.
that
Yep.
is a strange implementation
Yep.
because the rules as written, you are allowed to do that.
Correct. Yes. So it is an optional rule on .games, but it is the rules as written, and you are playing this game with that variant or not variant.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that variation. Yeah.
Um, Hushed is passing still. Third Monkey passing. Daniel, ton of cash for him still. He's buying the SFTG. This is an
Mhm.
attractive company, has a permanent train, great track. Titan Rich passing. You have shares in the SFTC to buy potentially, which you do. So you're going to be stealing that presidency. And Daniel, he's investing in the SFTC as well.
Yeah. Now that people can see I'm taking it over, they want the shares.
Sure. I mean, it's the same company, but it's a totally different context.
Yeah, it'll have a train now. Rich
Yep.
couldn't give it a train, but I can.
And you could potentially merge it, which you probably will.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
much more attractive investment.
Yep. Everybody wants a piece of that.
So you're selling out of the SFTG to buy the SFTC, but you're going to be kind of a bearer president with only 4 shares.
Yeah, only 4 shares. Oh
Actually,
well.
actually, it looks like Daniel gives you the opportunity. Oh no, Hushed bought it. Okay, sorry. Um,
Yep.
so Titan Rich still passing. You have money for one more share, it looks like. You buy your SFLI, and I think everyone else is just passing.
Okay. Finally, we get out of the stock round.
um, all right. So just taking stock of the game state again. Um, you have a very complicated agglomeration of companies and
Yep.
have no permanent trains amongst any of them. But you
Yep.
do have pretty healthy treasuries, so are
Yeah.
potentially able to manufacture some permanent trains here. The
At this point, I think that I have the healthiest portfolio and I will win as long as I don't have an anvil fall on my head.
right,
And if that happens, then Daniel will probably win.
yeah, and it's kind of incumbent upon Daniel to make that happen. Um, I guess that's not necessarily the case. The AFI and ICSF both have cash for trains as well. Um, so it's not like he's going to be alone in engineering the rest of this train rush. All right. ICSF is up, and I imagine he'll be buying that last six. Um, he lays the track into Lugano and gets a run into Switzerland with that. He also tokens in Bergamo, so that's the token that I think Daniel was worried about. But now Daniel's not even running the AFI, so I don't know that he cares anymore. Um,
Yeah.
running for 360, which he pays, and he has a bunch of treasury shares, but doesn't really need them just yet. Buys the six.
Mhm.
RSFS is up, and this is your child company. You lay a run for the SB, and I assume this is because you want to merge the SB. Um, let's see how that works. So you buy a train out of the SFLI, issue shares. So interesting though, if you're not going to merge with the RSFS after you issued. So I imagine you're going to be merging with one of your other companies. We'll see how that works. And you're
I mean,
actually,
100A's is still a nice stock price. I don't know which one I'll merge with.
yeah, but you have a ton of options in terms of merging. So if you could merge with something else, you probably will, I would assume.
Yeah.
You're starting the CTS, and that goes in Cremona. You really don't have too many options, so just
Yeah.
picking things around Milan is usually a safe bet. That goes for 340, and you do merge. Okay, so I don't know. You had other companies that could have merged. The CGTF, where is that? Or the CFC is the other option. So the
Um,
CFC is just slightly better share price, but it would fall back. So I guess it ends up being about
so
equivalent.
here's the reason that I decided to merge now. There are two companies left, the ILTF and the RAT, that can be started. If
Hmm.
both of those companies get started, mergers are no longer allowed because there is no charter remaining to merge into.
I
So if I
see.
don't merge now, there's a risk I never get to merge.
Okay, that's an interesting consideration. Yeah. So fair enough, because these other players probably would love for you to lose your ability to merge and then fall on all these permanent trains. So
Mhm.
that's a real risk. Okay. Um, so you do merge, and everybody gets a huge bump in their stock prices. And looks like after they get that bump, they're selling out, which is probably good news for you because it's, as you pointed out before, giving you IPO shares in your new company. Um, and still working on the merger. And we are finally onto the IFAI. So the new company that you just floated ends up with, what is it, 8 shares in the market? Looks like it, or
Uh,
8 shares in the
the
IPO.
CTDA is the company we're talking about,
Oh,
right? It has 5 shares in the IPO and two
okay.
shares in the market.
Yep.
It's all very confusing.
Yeah, I'm getting lost in the sauce. All
Yeah.
right. IFAI is up, running from Marseille to Milan still, has a very healthy treasury. And do we see the first seven come out here? We should, I assume. Yes. All right. So all those 4 trains are gone, and we are really off to the races. There's going to be a scramble for um, who can afford permanent trains, these very expensive permanent trains. Third monkey operating the AFI and has a 5 train, but probably needs to secure this last 7 train. Doesn't want to fall
Yeah.
back once those 8s come out. So he gets a run into Milan, pays out 380, and that is the last 7 gone. He also is very close to having an 8 train, but he is train locked, so not going to be able to bring it out without shuffling trains around. Now we're back to your companies. This is the company operating out of Milan. You're not going to be able to emergency buy a train here, I don't think. Are you? Let's see.
Oh, I give myself a route, and then
Yeah, you do.
let's look.
So you buy a train across. You're not going to emergency buy just yet. Um,
Oh, yeah, looks like it.
I mean, it would have been possible. The way it works is you just sweep money um,
Yeah.
over. So had you bought the 8 there, um, would there have been companies falling back trainless? I don't
Let's
think
see,
so.
800, 1,000. So the problem is, if I were to emergency fundraise there, the CTDA would have to discard its presidencies of the other companies,
Okay,
which was something I had not thought about when I did the merger.
sure.
Um, that
And
those presidencies would appear in that company.
they would have just
I
been
was hoping to
frozen.
I was hoping to sell the IPO shares of that company in order to help the CGTF emergency fundraise, but when it merged with the SV, it took on 2 additional presidencies.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was a miscalculation, and this is where I'm starting to worry that I might not make it out.
And those kind of miscalculations are very easy to make when you are running what, 8 companies,
Oh
seven,
yeah,
six
the game
companies.
state is very complicated. I'm often making moves on my phone.
Yeah,
It is yeah, it's difficult.
it gets very complicated. All right. Your other daughter company is up, and you are not giving yourself a run just yet. Do you issue shares here? Yes, you do. So just kind of building up the capital for your eventual 8 trains.
Yeah.
And you're parring another company, so your portfolio is becoming even more complicated. Um, ILTF is starting on Alessandria. Okay. Expensive tokens, but potentially useful um, if you ever are hoping to bypass Cuneo and get into Milan. SFTG is up and upgrades Como. Runs for 500, pretty good run. And he's going to be struggling to find another permanent train. Unfortunately, he's just going to slowly fall behind if he's running a single permanent train, it looks like. Buys a
Well,
CTD.
because he's gonna have to merge when his other chain rusts. Oh no, the AFI. He stole the AFI. Right. No, this is a different situation. Yeah.
He needs a second permanent train for one of
He
his
needs.
companies.
Yeah, but he's actually going to be able to get it. He's not going to have to merge the SFTG. So this position's better than I anticipated after stealing Daniel's company.
Yeah. Um, SFTG buying a share. And now we're to the SFLI, which for the first time in a while doesn't have a train. Um, and just upgrading track down south. Buys a
Yeah,
train.
I'm shuffling a 5 between all my companies. It's kind of miserable. The
Yeah.
saving grace is that the 5 at least exists, or else I would be
For
dead. You
now.
know, we call it poison 5, but actually the 5 is my elixir of life right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, it exists for now. I don't think it's long for this world looking at the
Yeah, but if it didn't exist now, I would be bankrupt.
all right, SFLI um, buying a share in the CTDA, ATFA. So I think this is where we'll see Third Monkey shuffle trains and get the cash for the first 8. Um, he is upgrading some track runs, and then he buys. So he's buying a token from the AFI instead of a train. So he's giving it A train money, but it's still train locked. Am I correct in saying that? 2 trains? Yes.
The AFI is train locked, yeah.
So he needs to buy this train across if he wants to bring out the 8, which he doesn't do. And that's hard for me to explain. Um,
Hmm.
I think he is he just making a miscalculation here, or is he expecting someone else to bring out the 8 and rust it before the
Yeah,
AFI operates?
that's interesting. I don't know.
I mean, just looking at operating order very kind of naively, there's no one right now in a position to buy an 8 train. There always potential for emergency buying potentially, but
Yeah, I
not
think that I'm going to buy an 8 train before he runs
in the SFTC.
somewhere.
No.
I know, but I've got some companies running ahead of him. We'll
Yeah.
see if it ends up punishing him, but he probably should have moved the 5 out just in case.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Buys the CTDA, and now he's merging. So he does end up merging his SFTG, like you were kind of saying.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, now he doesn't even have to.
yeah.
So I thought he had to. Now he doesn't, but he does it anyway. So
All
who
right.
knows?
And he's removing his token from Parma, and now we have the rat operating
He's got
out
a new
of
name.
operating out of Milan.
Hmm.
So he's got two companies, two permanent trains. Doesn't have any train liability at this point, but
Money for a third train. Yep, he's doing good.
yeah. SFTC, your newly acquired company, is up
Mhm.
and does not have a train.
Nope.
So you are continuing to shuffle that sorry 5 train,
Yes, I am.
um, and buying some shares in the CTDA. I think you're just kind of working on capitalizing this company without having it have to issue, which makes me suspect that you are going to just try and sweep cash into one of
Yeah,
your
that must be
companies.
the intention.
I think
Yeah.
so. ICSFF, I keep mispronouncing these companies, running its 6 train and somehow has ended up with a token in Verona. Must have had a split company that it merged with in
Yeah.
order to end up with that, and has given you a run that I'm sure you are not eager to have received. Um, but that company's operating so late, you're going to find a way to manufacture an 8 train before this company runs, I
I got
think.
so many companies with routes. What's one more?
Yeah. um, ICSF pays out for a 500, um, and he has a pretty healthy treasury. He could also find a way to arrive at an 8. So he issues 2 shares, just enough to get the 8 train, but not going to be able to buy it just yet. CTS, passing everything, just shuffling that train. But again, you're kind of slowly consolidating cash from your many presidencies.
Yeah.
IL,
It's painful to have all my companies just fall backwards and not run trains.
yeah, ILTF has
Is
routes.
this where I finally buy the train?
I think it is. Yeah. So you're emergency
Yeah,
buying,
okay. Yeah, I need to.
and that 5 train goes the way of the dodo, and you now have a shiny new 8 train. Still have a lot of work to do to kind of simplify your position and develop your routes. Um, IFAI, probably a little bit sad that it was just short of running its 5 train, but does have a nice 7 train. And I believe it can run all the way down to Rome from Milan. We'll see.
690. That's pretty good.
Yeah. That's Daniel's company, but it's Daniel's company by 10%. So even though your company's not running, as you've kind of mentioned, your portfolio shares are still very good, which is
Yeah.
keeping you in the game.
Yeah.
The Rat, new company in Milan, running its 6 train and has a pretty good run. But he's only 20% of the presidency, which is the danger that you had foreseen a while ago from that merge. AFI does have 8 train money and has, honestly, kind of an underwhelming route. Even with
Yeah.
two permanent trains, this is not going to be great. So I imagine he's going to shuffle this train into a different company down the road.
Oh, the extra train. Yeah, perhaps.
Lays in Pavia, runs for 420, does buy an 8, and we are on to your companies again. So you're just developing routes into Milan and Switzerland, I think, because all of your companies are going to end up merging at some point. Um, to develop runs, late game runs. You actually emergency.
Um,
Sorry.
I will merge when it's favorable for my portfolio. Otherwise, I plan not to.
Are you going to be able to maintain all these presidencies if you
Doesn't
don't?
matter. I only care about maintaining the presidencies of companies that have trains during a stock round.
That's fair. So you're emergency buying another eight train. It looks like
Yep.
when your stock value is so high, you're able to emergency buy trains pretty effectively, anyways. Even getting
Yeah.
the half value.
This is the train I wanted to buy last turn. And so by injecting some more money into the CTDA, I was allowed to buy it this turn. Because this is where I would have had to discard presidencies if I bought it last turn.
Sure. And that's what you were accomplishing basically by shuffling that five train around and getting all the cash
Yeah.
into
Yeah. And by buying the IPO shares of the CTDA with one of my
with the other
companies.
companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
CTDA does link up with your other company, just gradually heading west. And you're not going to emergency buy the train. You just shuffle it out of your other presidency.
Yep.
SFLI, no train still, and buys the 8 from the CTDA. So the SFLI, I assume you're going to be keeping trains in this company because you own 50% of
My
it.
hope is that I get to pay out with this company every turn for the rest of the game.
Yeah, because you have the significant investment in it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of the PhysicsSquirrel show at this point. You you have the by far the
Yeah.
most presidencies, so we
Yeah.
just kind of keep hovering from your presidency to another one. Um, you buy one of the trains out of the SFLI, of course, leaving at least one in the company because you're hoping to run it. Um, SFTC, I assume this is going to get merged away soon. Um, Upgrading Lugano
That is the hope. Yeah.
and shuffling the 8 train, and you do merge it. So the ILTF and the SFTC are becoming one, and let's see how that works out for you. Um,
Yeah. So it becomes the ATFA.
and
And
you have 20% of it, but nobody else is heavily invested either, of course. So you have a pretty good route for it
yep.
from Milan down into Marseille, but you can, um, well, you don't have a token in Milan, so you can't hit Switzerland and Milan, but maybe you're going to work on
Eh,
that. I don't think you can
okay.
get a token in Milan, actually. I don't think that's going to be happening.
No, it's not going to happen.
So last operating round in the set, CTS is up.
Right. And so here's where I was hoping to emergency fundraise another eight so that I would be able to pay out with the ATFA and the SFLI.
Mm-hmm.
But the CTS failed to lay a track last round.
Uh,
So I cannot give myself a route, and I'm not allowed to emergency fundraise.
right.
So unfortunately, I am forced to buy an eight from a friend.
Yep. You have to shuffle again. I see what you're talking about. And late in the game, you only have one track per OR. So out of luck there.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you,
actually, I don't buy a train from a friend in this company, but I don't have a train to give my other, like the CTDA is going to have to steal a train from
right.
one of my companies.
Yeah, because you don't have a route, so you don't have obligation for a train, but you also can't emergency buy it.
Right.
IFAI running his 6, and he actually is able to run all the way down into Florence, but is out of tokens, so not able to, you know, cause any pain points for anyone. Runs for 700 and pays that out. ICSF, he has enough cash for an 8 train and probably should be looking to pick one up, um, which he does. I'm just moving kind of quickly through this
Oh yeah, yeah,
at this point.
definitely. We should speed through these. Yeah.
Uh, so just paying out. ATFA. So you are able to run this company, but you only have a 20% investment in it and running for 490, which you pay. And you're selling shares. I assume you're going to be shuffling the cash out of here. Oh, so you're actually parring yet another company. Oh boy, it's
Yeah.
becoming very
It's the cheapest
complicated.
way to buy a train.
And you put that on Verona, so over in the east with your kind of conglomeration of daughter companies.
Yeah, it's just there to buy a train.
Yeah. AFI running two trains, but really, well, now he has better routes actually. He can run from Milan in two directions. So 940 is actually really good. Only 30% of the presidency, unfortunately. CTDA, and we're back to all your daughter companies, so a lot of train shuffling going to be happening.
Yeah, this is where I had to steal the Atlas train, even though I own 2 shares of it.
Yep.
I was not very happy about that.
SFLI is better news for you. You're able to run that 8, which you pay out. CFCC, just shuffling the train still. CGTF, um, I think you're eventually going to merge this up with the ATFA, maybe? We'll see. Yep, you do right now. Okay.
Oh, this merger was so painful. This is why I wasn't sure if I had it. So this merger had to happen because the CGTF was running last
Mm-hmm.
and it needed to own a train. And I was not able to connect it with anything else other than the ATFA. So I had to take my 2 shares at 269 and
Yep.
turn them into 1 share at 269. Gut punched.
Well, you are surviving the train rush, which was,
Yeah.
I think, your goal. Everybody's selling
Yep.
out of the ATFA, and we are into the stock
Yeah.
round.
Now that this merger's happened, I've experienced all of the pain that I'm going to experience.
Yep.
So we can definitely sort of evaluate positions
Yeah.
after this.
Um, so I think we'll go through the stock round just briefly. But just at the
Yep.
start of the stock round, I mean, you're in a very strong position. You have 12 shares. You have all the trains that you're anticipating you're going to need. You still have some presidencies to kind of wrap up, but shouldn't have any difficulty really doing that. And
Yeah.
you have really good routes. So I think your share lead is probably going to be, the determining factor um, at this
Yeah.
point.
At this point, it looks like Daniel's got a lot of money on me to buy new shares, but it looks like I'm going to edge him out with my portfolio. I felt very uncertain about this throughout this last set of ORs. There was a lot of very complicated machinations that I had to make through, that I had to make it through to make sure that I did enter this operating round, the stock round, with 2 companies that each had a train and with the ability to buy additional trains so that I could stay solvent.
Yeah.
But we made it through the woods.
Yep.
And here we are.
You didn't bankrupt. And I mean, Daniel has, $400 more than you, but at the end of the day, he's 6 shares behind you. And the shares are expensive enough that that $400 is only going to translate into maybe one extra share. So I think you're in a pretty strong position. Um,
Yep.
so, having done that analysis, we decided to just kind of skip through the stock round and just evaluate everyone's portfolios at the end of the stock round and just determine that, we truly had a handle on who was ahead in this game. So Titan Rich, he's eliminated, has been eliminated for a while. PhysicsSquirrel, 15 shares, cert limit, good runs, and has presidencies that he needs to address, but will be able to do that. Hushed has only 8 shares, so 7 behind PhysicsSquirrel. Has two trains in the ICSF, which is going to be pretty good. The ICSF has good runs, can run from Switzerland into Milan and then from Milan down into Rome. Actually, cannot quite make it to Rome because of the Pisa tokens, but still very good runs. And his death knell is just going to be his shares. Third Monkey, he has an AFI, which is running pretty darn good, but only owns 40% of it and is 6 shares behind. And then Daniel has an IFAI, but his portfolio is being split, or his investment in the IFAI is being split by his leader, PhysicsSquirrel, so also kind of in a rough spot. So I feel very confident that, this is a winning position for you. Do you have any liabilities that you're concerned about at this point?
Um, At this point, no. Most of my concerns have been resolved. I'm expecting I'm going to get a few of those remaining 8 trains, and I'll be able to run multiple permanent trains in one or both of my companies.
Okay.
Um, yep.
All right. Well, we will just skip to the end for formality, and you of course win this game fairly handedly. $1,300 ahead of your closest competitor. I'll give you an opportunity to give your thoughts about the game, but before I do that, my kind of impression from someone that didn't play this game was that there were two kind of um, really key moments in this game. And one was the steal on the SFLI. I think that really shook things up a ton, and you were able to capitalize on that very well. And then the second one is that the Daniel lost out on one of his companies. The AFI was stolen away, his Eastern system, and he was your closest competitor. I think losing that system put him far enough behind that you were able to, eke out a win here. Not eke out, you ended up winning fairly convincingly, but I think it put
But it
him,
wasn't certain at all points, yeah.
yeah. But I think that really kind of knocked him down because I really liked his position up until that point. Um, so I'm sure we could go back and with a fine tooth comb really dissect how he ended up losing one of those presidencies. But I think that's what cost him his position. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts or things that I've
Um,
missed?
I feel that the 2 points that would be most meaningful to look at in this game are when I exited, I believe, the third stock round with 30% of Daniel's company and 30% of Third Monkey's company. I
Hmm.
think at that point my portfolio was strong enough that I was going to win the game unless something bad happened to me.
Okay.
And then the other point was when I was able to take over the SFLI,
Yeah.
because that gave me enough control that I could insulate myself from bad things happening. The SFLI was able to start companies, the SB was able to start companies, and I was able to use control of those additional companies to get my permanent trains. So taking over the SFLI definitely, and having that strong portfolio in the mid game.
Yeah.
When Daniel's company was taken over, I don't feel like that affected his position as much as it might seem. As you can see, he is actually not at cert limit at the end of the game.
Hmm.
And so the losing the share density of that presidency actually did not affect his position. Um, and the control of that company would have allowed him to potentially have some better routes, but I don't think that it was the difference.
Okay. I would argue that yes, that's true. I think the process by which he lost the AFI hurt him a lot. Just losing the value in the shares, like there was a lot of sales of shares that hurt his stock value and that kind of thing, and just hurt his liquidity and ability to, um, I guess, invest in other shares. But yeah, I see what your point is. I mean, he's not at a cert limit, so the extra share density from the presidency kind of becomes moot at that point.
Yeah,
Um, all right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the channel and doing this game. It's an incredibly complex game, and I really appreciate your insight. Um,
thank you.
and Track Talk will be back in the future with additional commentary.